Hello, everybody. It's time for narration day today. I think I'm gonna have to find a some soft fantasy movies. I don't know which one to pick though. So can't be anything too well. I don't want it to be super. I don't know, super adventurous, I guess. Let me also, I need to link this. So this is the book that I am reading today. You guys can find it up here on Amazon. Get a link. Okay, well, that's weird. Somehow it logged me out of Twitch chat over on my... I don't understand, but whatever. We'll just, that's super weird, but... As I'm logged in at the browser, and then OBS chat's like, you gotta log in. But anyway, there's the pin. That is the book I'm reading today. So make sure you go and check it out if you're interested in lesbian WLW romance with adventure, because that's what it is. It is a adventure magic story. It's really good. I read all the books, of course. My husband did write it, so my raccoon husband. All right, so we're gonna try. Oh no, ads. Okay. It's gonna take me a while to read this book. Kinda want something soft, but I don't know. Let's see.
If you're using ChatGPT but don't know how to monetize it, watch this video to the end.
YouTube's giving me so many ads. Alright, we'll just put this one on repeat, I guess. Alright, so this is A Kiss of Spirit and Stone by Mr. Boga. Tales of Love and Magic, book number 6. I'm just gonna turn this down a bit. We want this just to be background noise, soft background noise. Chapter 1. Hildine was always eager to please her parents and the elders. In the Stone Tribe, strength were paramount. Strength of body and strength of mind. Tears were not allowed. Laughing was not allowed. Children were expected to cease laughing and playing by their 3rd birthday and be able to fight on par with normal human men by the time they turned 5. Hildine, now 13, had been passed over several times for the role of Mountain Guardian. The mountain held the secret to their gift of stone, a magic that made them several feet taller than normal humans, with flesh that resisted all forms of damage, and a constitution that made them nearly impervious to the bitter northern cold. Of course, the harsh environment repelled all weak things that didn't possess the intellect to avoid conflict. What would normally be predators in nearby lands were both predator and prey in these mountains. All native species had inherited the gift of stone. A bear here was well over 10 feet tall and could rip even a stone tribesman in half with ease. Every living thing was gifted with the blessing of stone here, except the grass eaters. Humans who only shared their resistance to the cold and nothing more. They did not hunt the animals here and spent their days creating art, telling stories, and playing music. As they were described to Hildine, she expected them to be soft and grotesque, transparent skin that ripped apart with a gentle touch. She imagined them as diseased and cowardly, running in fear at the sight of something as small as a snow rat. Sneaking into the wilds, hoping to bring back the head of a dire bear, she'd ventured out much farther than she had before and was lost. The snow-covered trees filled her visions, and the white sheet beneath her made it impossible to see fallen branches without tripping over them first. Occasional bursts of wind sent up a cloud of white that put her ability to maintain direction to the test. She spotted a clearing with running water and carefully, quietly made her way there. Following a stream was always a safe bet, and she needed that certainty in this unfamiliar territory. A strange sound echoed through the surrounding forest. As she moved, the branches of a tree aside to see, everything she thought she knew exploded in her face. Sitting on a rock, rolling her fingers across a hollow wooden device, was a small girl who looked about her age. Many large and dangerous animals even Hildine dared not expose herself to, grazed casually in her presence. They didn't attack her, and the sound she was making did not disturb them. The girl opened her mouth and manipulated her voice in the strangest ways. Magic. It must have been because Hildine's skin felt as though warm water had been poured across it. Tingling that began from the top of her head and followed her body and limbs until it reached her toes. Was this singing? This couldn't have been a grass eater. It must have been a forest spirit trying to lure her to her death. She had to resist it. She couldn't give in. She had to. You don't have to watch me from the trees like that, you know. Come and sit with me. The voice was soft and gentle. It had an inviting character, as though it carried another magic spell with it, robbing her of her ability to decline anything asked of her by this beautiful female spirit. An elf. She was certain of it now. This was an elf. No human could be this. She couldn't even summon the words to her mind to describe this feeling, or the creature before her. Hildine didn't answer. She sucked in a deep breath. She was no coward. Her legs shook with fear. Was it fear? It was strange. It did not feel like fear. Forcing one foot forward, then the other, she entered the clearing. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she held a hand above her brow to block the invading rays of sunlight beaming from the unobstructed sky. This elf would know that she would not fear any spirit or mythical being. She was a member of the Stone Tribe. Showing fear was forbidden. I'm not afraid of you, Hildine choked out, spooking some animals nearby. The girl giggled, holding out her hands and calming the unnerved animals. After a moment, they returned to their tasks. I should hope not. Truth be told, I'm not very scary. I expected members of the Stone Tribe to have giant fangs and bulging muscles, spittle dripping from their lips as they growl at every passing creature. Some have told me they attack anything they see. I knew it was all lies. But you know, you're actually very beautiful, she said. She'd said it so casually that Hildine thought she might collapse from the sudden shock. She knew the meaning of the words, but flowery language like that was forbidden. Beautiful? Her? She placed her hands on her face. Why did it feel so hot suddenly? Elf? Was all Hildine could say. Was this a spell too, suppressing her ability to speak properly? The girl giggled again, doubling over this time before sitting upright again and clearing her throat. She brushed her long, blonde hair from her eyes, and her smile was so vast it narrowed her big blue eyes. Now you're flirting with me? No, I don't believe there are any elves, and if there are, I'm certainly not one of them. Just a girl like you. I hope that doesn't disappoint you. Disappoint me? Hildine asked, tilting her head. You're a grass eater? The girl put her hand to her mouth, trying to stop herself from giggling a third time. Well, I've heard that's what your people call me, so yes, but also no. Oh, thank you for following, Rune Rays. Hello? How are you doing? Well, I've heard that's what your people call me, so yes, but also no. I'm not eating very much grass in my life. We let our livestock eat grass. We have a mostly plant-based diet, but we also do a bit of fishing. Up in the mountains, I guess you mostly eat what you hunt there. I'm doing good, and that's good to hear. Again, thank you for joining. I'm reading A Kiss of Spirit and Stone by Mr. Brogath. I've pinned it to the comments if you want to check out a book yourself. Hildine was shocked again and slow to answer. This grass eater was showing her so much respect, and she had a complete lack of fear. She found it admirable, if not awe-inspiring. A member of the tribe who hated them, armed with axes, approaching her sitting alone. She was half her size, with no weapon, and yet she could not conceive of any scenario where she would want to harm her. Magic? You're right. This is what we eat. I must ask you, are you manipulating me with magic? Answer me truthfully. The girl's eyes were wide, as though the question caught her off guard. What do you mean? What are you feeling that you think is being caused by magic? When I look into your eyes, my balance feels off. When I heard your voice, my skin tingled with a strange heat. It's a challenge for me to look you in the eyes. When I do, my stomach churns like I've eaten spoiled meat. I try to speak simple words to you, but my voice cracks and falters when I tried to push them out. Welcome, Mr. Brogath. It's good that you have finally arrived for your own story. For your own story time. The girl blushed and stared at her for a moment, saying nothing. Are you saying you are attracted to me? I thought you'd find me disgusting. Attracted? Do you mean as a mate? We can't make children, Hildine said, very matter-of-factly, forcing a note of defiance in her voice. She'd heard the lectures from the elders many times. Although everyone in the Stone Tribe was a warrior, their low birth rate made it a necessity to put producing children at the very highest goal. Pairing with someone of the same gender was impossible, and it was wrong, selfish. Oh, the girl muttered, scratching her chin. I forgot that you really have children. I guess that mindset makes sense. But you don't have to have children to become a pair. Aren't there men and women in your tribe without children who stay paired anyway because they like each other? It was Hildine's turn to scratch her chin. Others in the tribe don't like that. What about you? What do you like? Not what your tribe expects you to like. What you like? Me? I don't know. I've never thought about it. The girl smiled again. Maybe you should think about it. What's your name? Mine's Marylander. Hildine, can I come here and see you again? Won't you get in trouble? Marylander asked, tilting her head. I have decided I want to see you again. I won't ask their permission. I won't tell them either. They might try to hurt you, and you don't have weapons. Marylander wiggled her eyebrows. Who told you that? She said, pointing to the rock she was sitting on. Were you focused so much on me that you didn't see my sword propped up against the rock over there? Hildine couldn't believe it. She really hadn't seen it. I've heard you never fight, she said. We don't, Marylander answered. Hildine frowned, trying hard to wrap her mind around the statement. They carry swords, but don't fight? Why didn't you draw when I entered the clearing? You were told my people attacked on sight, but you didn't arm yourself? A sword is rarely needed, only a last resort. Besides, I knew you wouldn't hurt me. I already told you I didn't believe those stories. You were foolish to trust me so much, especially when you have no magic. Marylander grinned, holding up a finger. Oh, I didn't say I had no magic, only that I wasn't using any kind of magic to manipulate you. I can connect to the spirits of animals and share my feelings with them in a way. They can also share them with me if they wish to. It's how I told them you weren't a threat after you startled them. These are some of the most dangerous animals on the continent. You've tamed them? Oh, no, definitely not. We just coexist peacefully. Some are friendly, some aren't. Like us. Say, Hildine, would you like to come back to my village with me and meet the others? I want to use you as a teaching opportunity. We are peaceful, so even if they don't like it, they won't harm you. What do you say? What? I don't know. I don't think it's wise to... Marylander placed her hands behind her back and skipped around Hildine, grinning. I understand if you're scared. It's okay. You don't have to. What? Hildine said, puffing at her chest. I'm not afraid of a bunch of grass eaters. That's the spirit, Maryland shouted, grabbing Hildine by the hand and pulling her along. In that moment, she knew beyond any doubt it would forever change the course of her life. And that's the end of chapter 1. I'm gonna get me a sip of water. We'll do chapter 2. Sonny is on the desk, and he's kind of controlling the model at the moment with his tail, so he likes to wave it in front of the camera. So if he does, my model will freak out, but don't mind him. Of course, I put the book down and now he's stepping on it. Give me that book. Don't scratch it. It's too pretty. Now you got hair all over it. Alright. Chapter 2. Marylander's people were primarily of two mindsets. He'll lay on it if it sits there for 10 seconds. Oh yeah, he was already sitting on it. One was to make themselves meek and avoid being seen as a threat by anyone. What I'm worried about is him trying to bite it while I'm holding it. One was to make themselves meek and avoid being seen as a threat by anyone. The other was to be peaceful but strong. Appear as a threat, but only to maintain peace, prepare to defend themselves only if necessary. The first mindset was by far the most prevalent. Marylander subscribed to the second. Will it not cause problems for you if I meet your people? Hildine said, trying to sound as though she was afraid for Marylander and not simply afraid. She was both. Your concern is very sweet, but no. They will surely be upset with me, but that's nothing new, Marylander said with a smile. It would be too difficult to explain to Hildine, even if she tried. Better for her to just see it. While most of her people valued isolation, she was adventurous and explored against their wishes. Even their treasured gift of communicating with beasts had faded away for many. The same gift allowed them to inhabit areas infested with dangerous predators where even the stone tribe dared not venture. Is it much further? Hildine asked, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar snowy forest. As if to answer her, the plucks of stringed instruments filled the air, along with singing, loud conversation, and laughter. After only a short distance further, Marylander stopped, took a deep breath, and parted the tree branches that hung in front of them. The last obstacle between them and the village. Hildine took a step back. At first, Marylander thought she might be afraid. A second look clarified her expression was one of disgust and contempt. What's wrong? You're already here. You may as well come in and meet them. Hildine shook her head. This is exactly the way to describe your people to me. They seem very weak, Hildine said, without hesitation. Many are. Remember that these woods are infested with dangerous predators that pay us no mind. We are well protected. They didn't make themselves known to us because my presence calmed them. They will remember your scent, but not other stone tribesmen who wander into the area. Marylander took a step forward, but Hildine still hesitated. Seemed she was saying all the wrong things and scaring the girl even more. She reached out, taking her hand and leading her. Hey, wait, She protested, but still allowed herself to be pulled along despite being much bigger and stronger than Marylander. The two immediately drew attention from everyone nearby. Is that? A man said, putting down his instrument and standing, holding his hand at his brow as if the sun was playing tricks on him. Run! A child shouted, bolting in the other direction, followed by all the other children who were playing with them. Marylander laughed, pulling Hildine close to her side. As you might have guessed, you were the first stone tribe member most of the younger people here has ever seen. The squinting man approached them. Well, I'll be. You're too big to even be one of our adult women. You really are from the stone tribe. Hildine stood straight. I am Hildine. My father is Helgrath. My mother is Menaria. The man chuckled, smiling and nodding. You know, they'll probably never admit it, but we used to have regular visitors from the stone tribe who came secretly, just as I assume you have. You're the first in a long while. The graying features of the man, although not especially old, gave some weight to his words. A long while for him could be decades. Well, you're the first to meet my new friend. I'm glad it was you instead of some others. Do you know where my father is right now? Marylander asked. He's up on the hill with the other monks training. They're having another rough day from what I hear. Another argument about the temple? She asked, frowning. I'm afraid so, he said. Aha! Hildine might help us settle that. He chuckled before calming himself quickly and offering a more serious response. Sorry, if there's one thing we aren't known for, it's changing our mind about things. Doesn't matter what you show them. Still, try it if you feel the need. Hildine will really get an education on how this community functions. Hildine was dumbstruck. The casual way they spoke to one another. The casual way they disregarded her presence. The fact that an adult valued the opinion of a teen girl, not even a woman yet. What do you say? Still feeling brave, Hildine? Marylander asked, grinning. A stone tribeswoman is always brave. I can handle anything you throw at me. The elder man let out a sharp whistle. Does she really have to go home? He asked, directing the question to Marylander. Marylander looked up at Hildine, smiling. Maybe one day. Anyway, we'd better get going if we're going to catch the big debate, she said, yanking Hildine along by her hand, which she was still holding to Hildine's surprise. Marylander wondered if she might visit the stone tribe one day, just as Hildine was doing with their community. Unlikely. Marylander completely ignored the gasps and the chatter as she pulled Hildine along past several huts. The village was much smaller than the stone tribe's territory, able to hold their entire population in one place. They took no time at all to reach the temple on the opposite end. Several men stood outside it, bickering. I've told you many times, this temple only assures we can protect ourselves. The Stone Tribe has left us alone for now, but what if the others expand their territories to the west? A tall, blond man asked, leaning on a long wooden sword. The land where the goddess's tomb rests? Surely you're joking. No kingdom on the continent would dare establish territories in that place, an elderly man retorted. His hair was fully gray, certainly older than the man they'd met when they'd first entered the village. It amazed Hildine the two men argued as equals. In the Stone Tribe, elders were to be respected and obeyed. They respected few of the younger men enough to argue with them. Their exchange was so boisterous that they'd not even noticed the two of them standing there and watching. Hey, Dad. Sorry I'm so late getting back, Marylander said, waving at the blonde man. Marylander, you're... Who's that? He asked, pointing to Hildine. Hildine stood straight and pulled back her shoulders, showing the man they could not intimidate her. My new friend. I found her... Well, she found me today when I was meditating in the forest, Marylander replied. Aren't you from the Stone Tribe? The older man asked, his eyes wide. My name is Hildine, and I'm a proud member of the Stone Tribe, Hildine said, a little louder than she meant to. You should get her out of here, Marylander. What if they come looking for her and it causes trouble? That won't be a problem, Hildine snapped. Anyone who goes missing can't find their own way back is unworthy of being a member of the Stone Tribe. No one looks for them. I used the wrong voice. Oops. I misread it. Marylander squeezed her hand, reminding Hildine that they still had them together, prompting her to let go. She'd known Hildine mere hours, and she would gladly go looking for her if she went missing. Was there no compassion at all in the Stone Tribe? Marylander's father frowned, but changed the subject upon noticing Hildine's obvious discomfort at being the target of another's pity. He rubbed his hands together. Say, Hildine, how about a sparring match with my daughter? I want to show this old warrior worth that we're not just wasting time up here. You two look to be about the same age, and I assumed you're trained? You spar regularly? Hildine nodded. I accept your challenge. Any weapon you choose. Great. I'm Romos, by the way. Spent some time training in Arthurus in my youth, was a pretty famous duelist. Blaine Grave. Keep trying to show everyone else the value of good martial skills, but they never listen. You're from the Stone Tribe, so I know you agree with me. Marylander sighed. Please don't ask him to tell you any of his Blaine Grave stories. Hildine nodded again. Strong warriors are the backbone of any society that values survival. My father said those words many times. I like him already. Anyway, just choose any of the wooden weapons over there. Obviously, we try to avoid serious injuries here. Marylander was relieved to see Hildine finally relaxing, but she was a little annoyed that her father put her on the spot like this. He knew she hated sparring, and he was so dense that he couldn't tell she fancied this girl. Then again, he enjoyed poking and prodding her at every opportunity. Dad, do we really need to spar? Maybe we can just show our forms. The disappointed look on Hildine's face caught her by surprise. The Stone Tribe respects skilled warriors, Marylander, he said, turning his head and winking at her so only she could see. Oh, right. I guess I could do one match, but I want to show Hildine some other things today, too. But she would never go as so far as to smile. Hildine's face lit up again. Hold on, I gotta sneeze. Oh. I'll take the two clubs, she said. They're similar to what I've trained the most with. Oh, right, Marylander said, catching the stick her father tossed at her, similar in size and weight to her sword. Ready? Romos shouted, prompting the other monks to rush in a circle around them and attracting other nearby curious villagers. Romos, Marylander is half her size. Is this really... The old man protested, but Marylander cut him off. Ready! Ready, Hildine echoed. The two charged at one another, and Marylander was immediately forced to retreat from the powerful swings. Even a teen girl from the Stone Tribe was bigger and stronger than most of their biggest men. The speed was most surprising. She thought to be aggressive and end the match quickly, but that would be impossible. The almost smile was on Hildine's face again, and she found it almost intoxicating. If this is what it took to impress her, then. Marylander shifted, pivoting gracefully on the balls of her feet. More like a dance than an attack. Their styles were completely opposite. Strength and aggression against speed and grace, and something about their meeting felt beautiful. With two carefully timed dodges, Marylander evaded two close strikes without giving ground, still advancing. Turning her body slightly, then reversing her grip, she thrust the stick behind her. The blow caught Hildine in the stomach, taking her breath and knocking her to the ground. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," Marilander shouted, throwing down the stick and dropping her to her knees next to Hildine. Hildine's eyes were wide, and that almost smile glowed even brighter than before. "I've never seen anything like that. You're amazing, Marilander." Marilander blushed, her hands moving to cover her face instinctively. "You really think so? So, does that mean you'll come see me again?" Hildine nodded. "Will you let me train with all of you?" Marilander looked at her father, making subtle nods at him while waiting for him to answer. "Course she can," he said, shrugging his shoulders with a broad smile. "Yes!" Marilander shouted, grabbing Hildine's hands in hers. She knew without a shred of doubt that this would be one of the happiest days of her life. Okay, that was the end of chapter 2. Each chapter I gotta take a little sippy sip so I can keep reading. Oh. What? What is it, Mr. Bogath? What are you humming about? Oh. Gosh, that sneeze made my nose run. It could also be Sunny's hair. Sunny, am I slightly allergic to your presence? It could very well be. Wonder if this would be better in the reading and writing category. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I didn't even know there was like a reading part of the category. Oh, does it include narrating? Well, I guess I'll switch it then. I didn't realize there was a narrating. I knew there was a new writing category, but I didn't know there was writing and reading. There we go. There we go. Alright, I changed it. Alright. Oh. Sunny. Your hair's up my nose. Alright, chapter 3. 3 years later. Marilander sat up in bed, stretched, and mentally prepared herself for the day ahead. The sun hadn't yet risen like always, and was always too slow to keep up with her anyway. A week had passed since her 16th birthday. Now, she was a woman in the eyes of her people. She could choose a life partner. Anyone. This was usually an ordeal that went on for months, years, and often many years. Her community took great pleasure in courting and would often draw it out for as long as possible. Unlike the Stone tribe, their focus wasn't on childbirth. Their fertility rates were normal, which made managing their small population a mathematical task that had to be monitored regularly. They gave every woman with a male partner a supply of herbal birth control, and they drew a lottery every year to see who could try for children. The festival surrounding this drawing was one of the most exciting they had. It was rare for anyone to ever be bitter or jealous, because her people took care of children as a community. Everyone helped in the raising of children. Women who hadn't yet had their turn still had their days filled with the laughs and cries of little babies. None of this would be an issue for her. The partner she chosen was a woman, after all. Unlike the Stone tribe, this was something openly supported by her people. They had more than enough children and wanted everyone to be with the one they loved. Marilander rubbed her face, trying to remind herself this didn't have to be awkward. By now, Hildine knew their customs well enough. Sure, she never openly declared her feelings before, but she'd have to truly dense not to have noticed them. She sighed, flopping back onto the bed. What if she didn't even like her back? What if she confesses everything to her, and the first emotional response she ever gets to see from her is a big laugh? But what if it's the opposite? Her beautiful hazel eyes glisten in the morning sun as tears form in them. A strand of her brown hair falls against her perfect face as she tilts her head slightly, overwhelmed by the sudden surge of emotion. The smile Marilander always wanted to see on her face stretches as the ice over her heart breaks away, and she runs the sweeper off her feet, professing that she'd always loved her too. Marilander slammed her fingers into her hair, throwing blonde strands in all different directions. Grr! Her father stepped into the room, narrowing his eyes. Are you all right? She held her pillow over her face and sat up, patting the bed next to her. He slowly walked over and sat, giving her time to collect her thoughts. After a moment, she pulled the pillow away from her face and sighed. Dad, I'm 16 now. He nodded slowly, placing a hand on her forehead. I'm aware. I gave you that painting your mother made for your 16th birthday, remember? She swatted his hand away. I'm not sick. Sensing her dad's sudden change in mood, she shifted the conversation. I missed her too. He nodded, wrapping his arms around her and pulling her into a tight hug. There's no greater pain than losing someone you love before their time. But I think she'd be proud of us. Proud of you, Marylander, for the fine woman you've grown to be. Don't worry about your dad. You know I get a little sad anytime we bring up Mom. But even though I don't have our people's gift, I could tell that that isn't what you wanted to say. She often forgot that. As an outsider, he wasn't born with the gift of empathy. Instead, he was so considerate of the feelings of others that you could hardly tell the difference. They considered her mother a prodigy with her ability. She could read human feelings too, just as Marylander could. Many had the gift to connect with animals, but being able to feel another human's emotions was rare. It was also one thing that intrigued her about Hildine. Because of always how strictly they tried to train their emotions, she always felt confused. The same confusion Hildine likely felt. Glimmers of emotion would shine through and then she'd pull back. She was the one person who always kept her guessing. That's right, focus. You want to talk to him about Hildine. I'm in love with Hildine, Dad. I think about her always. I love her so much I can't think straight. She is the person I want to be with for the rest of my life. I decided that before my 16th birthday. Part of me knew it was the first day we met. Do you think? He laughed, slapping her on the shoulder. In love with Hildine, huh? You don't say? Who could have possibly seen this coming? Dad, be serious, Marylander said, frowning. Sorry, you're right. Well, if you're asking my opinion, I like Hildine. I think your mother would have liked her too. I just want you to understand that your gift lets you feel the love of other people, but it can't make them love. Hildine's people beat the love out of their children at a young age, and if she expresses she wants to be with another woman, she'll no longer receive support from the tribe. She'll basically be exiled. Sensing that he was doing more harm than good, he cleared his throat. That won't be a problem, of course. Our customs are clear that your life partner can live with you and your family. It's just... I'm fairly certain that she feels the same as me. I could sense her love whenever we're together, even though it feels strange and confused. There's no way she doesn't already understand my feelings. He shook his head. Just because she has those feelings doesn't mean she can recognize them or understand them yet. Sometimes breaking down the barrier to your own feelings can be harder than breaking down someone else's. Marylander nodded, growing quiet. This is why she wanted to talk to him. He was right. Even though she felt upset upon hearing the words, she knew he spoke them with compassion and wisdom. Do you think I should wait? She asked. What does your heart tell you? She took a deep breath and thought the question over. Thanks, Dad. We're supposed to meet soon, so I'm heading out. He smiled. I'll see you later then. Hildine was already waiting for her in the clearing, pacing back and forth, startled when she finally appeared. Marylander, I thought something might have happened. She smiled, waving as she approached. No, I just had to talk to my dad about something before I came today. Sorry for making you worry. Hildine nodded. There's something I want to tell. Both blurted out at once. Marylander laughed. You go first. Do you remember how I told you I wanted to become a guardian of the sacred mountain? I do. You said usually only the biggest and strongest of the men were allowed that honor, and you were told you never make the cut, Marylander replied. Right. Thanks to my training with you and the others, they've had second thoughts. My father told me today that after my 18th birthday, I'll be given an opportunity to complete the trials. Even as she told Marylander the news, there was no hint of emotion. Although this was her dream in life, outwardly she didn't appear the least bit excited. Marylander could feel the sparks, though. The heart never lies. Marylander smiled, running and hugging her around the waist. That's wonderful. All I need to do is marry one of our tribe's strongest warriors. As the first woman to be assigned to the mountain, they still want me to bear strong sons. Marylander let go and took a step back. Oh. What's wrong? Hildine asked, tilting her head. You were so happy for me a moment ago. Oh, that's right. You wanted to tell me something too. What was it? I love you, Hildine, she said softly, wiping tears from her eyes. When I think about you, my heart swells. I'm the happiest when I'm with you, and when we're apart, all I can think about is our next meeting. She took a breath and let it out slowly. I wanted to ask you to be my life partner, to be by my side forever. Didn't you know my feelings? Hildine took a step back now, staring at as though she'd morphed into a 10-headed monster. I didn't know. I really didn't. You should have told me. I shouldn't have to tell, Marylander shouted before stopping herself. No, you're right. I was foolish and unfair for assuming you know without my telling you. Sorry I shouted at you. I just wanted you to know that my confession hasn't changed and the offer is open. They said you had 2 years to decide, right? Maybe you'll think about it? We'll keep seeing one another, just as we always have, but now you can work through these feelings, unless, of course, you don't want to see me anymore? No, Hildine shouted, surprised by her own quick reaction. Don't say that. I don't express my feelings the way you do. That doesn't mean I don't feel them at all. I know I'm not supposed to. I know I'm supposed to suppress them to be the greatest warrior I'm capable of, but... Okay, 2 years then. I must give them my answer then. Will you be patient with me? Marylander smiled, stepping in for a hug. The feelings she felt from Hildine were usually confused and difficult to read, but now they were a sea of chaos. I can wait, she said. Though secretly she cried, holding together the pieces of her broken heart she hoped was only temporary. Chapter 3 has ended. It's time for Chapter 4. My nose is itching like crazy. Silly cat. He left now, but he just left hair like everywhere. It's just floating around. Continuing onward. Chapter 4. 2 years later. Hildine tried to prepare herself for what was sure to be an uncomfortable meeting. Today was the day she'd have to give her answer to everyone. And all this time, it was never brought up again. She never discussed her feelings or intentions with anyone. Not the elders, and certainly not her parents. No one would be interested in a conversation about feelings anyway. They weren't supposed to be a factor. It was the day she dreamed of since she was a girl. The heroes of her tribe, more respected than any other, were the guardians of the sacred mountain and its secrets. Stories were told to the tribe's children of their bravery and unmatched prowess in battle. In all the years they occupied these lands, no one had ever broken their defense. None had tried in more than 100 years. In all that time, they had never accepted a woman into their ranks. Hildine was the first to show the combat skill needed to qualify for trials. She worked so hard for this. She could be a legend, a story told to young girls in their tribe to inspire them to reach the same heights. Only now, she decided she no longer wanted it. Only now she realized there was something she never thought possible, a desire, even greater than her dream of becoming a guardian. It had taken her all this time to realize it. When she thought about donning the guardian's crest, her heart swelled with excitement. But when she thought of Marylander, her smile, her warmth, and her affection for her, the two cannot be compared. It took 2 years, but she knew with absolute certainty what she wanted now. Father, she said, standing before him, I have reached my decision. He did not show emotion, nor did he answer. He stood quietly, waiting for her to speak. Despite Hildine's size towering over Marylander, who was tall by human standards, she appeared almost childlike next to her father. The man was nearly 10 feet tall. A giant beard adorned his face, and his bushy eyebrows nearly obscured his vision. His arms, like massive bent tree trunks, folded over his chest. Ever since discovering the feelings of love and seeing the relationship Marylander had with her own father, she longed for that kind of bond. Yet, nothing resembling love had ever passed between them. He nodded with a grunt, urging her to speak quickly. Her mother stood beside him, her braided brown hair draped over her shoulder. Hildine had been her only child, and she had already aged beyond being able to bear more. Their legacy rested on Hildine's shoulders, and unlike her father, her face betrayed signs of tension. I will not be undergoing the trials, Hildine said. She was confident she could stand strong in their presence, but her legs felt heavy and her voice cracked. What? her mother asked, nearly shouting. But it's all you've ever talked about. What could have changed your mind? I'm in love with someone, Mother. I cannot accept the marriage conditions of becoming a guardian. But, her mother shouted, but her father held up his hand. She immediately fell silent. This may not be a problem. If you're drawn to another warrior, he must be strong, worthy. What is this man's name? I will speak to the elders, and I'm sure they can make an exception. Her name is Marylander. What? Her mother shrieked. Have you gone mad? You know this is forbidden. And that name sounds like a grass eater's name. She is. We've known each other for around 5 years now. Every day we spend time together. We train together, and that's how I hone the combat skills to qualify for the trials. Her father furrowed his brow, looking down, suddenly in deep thought. Grass-eater weaklings, no less, and a woman. You'd end your father's bloodline for your own selfish desires. Hildine shook her head. You've never cared for what I've done or where I've been before. Why such a strong interest now? Her father took a step toward her, now just in front of her. You'd better watch your tone, girl, he said through clenched teeth. Come to your senses before it's too late. You know when I inform the elders of your decision, you'll face exile. Hildine did not give an inch. So be it. My decision is final. Hildine! Her mother reached toward her, but again, her father held at his hand, silencing her. You have ears. She said her decision is final. Without another word, her father turned and walked away. Her mother stepped up to her, her expression as cold as mountain ice. I am so disappointed in you, Hildine. Unable to respond, Hildine fought the burning sensation in her eyes, as she knew her mother must have. She knew so much. She so much preferred the uncaring, uninvolved mother she knew. Choosing the same ex that her father had, she added nothing else to the conversation. She simply turned and walked away. She had someone else to inform of her decision after all, someone who loved her and who she loved. She longed for her happy embrace. Even though she couldn't find a smile of her own, she loved Marylanders. She loved to wipe away her tears, even though she could not cry her own. The decision was final, and she knew it would be the best decision she ever made. Making her way out of the village, she pondered her words. Strangely, she had been more prepared for the wrath of her parents and the elders than whatever reaction Marylander might have. She was suddenly nervous, afraid. What if she'd grown tired of waiting and didn't tell her? That wasn't logical. Of course, Marylander would tell her, worrying about things that weren't logical. Is that what someone does when they're in love? She shook her head. Right. She needed to finish what she started before speaking to Marylander. She'd face the elders herself and accept their judgment. If she was to be exiled, she'd stay with Marylander. Maybe they'd build their own home in the wilderness. Regardless, the elders would not be given the satisfaction of making her run away. Maybe she'd be able to convince them to allow her to go forward with the trials. Maybe she could have everything she wanted after all. She walked toward the village, circling around the end opposite where she'd exited. She didn't want to risk running into her mother again. Despite how she reacted, those words had cut her, even though she didn't understand why. As she approached from behind the elder's hut, she drew in a deep breath. She'd go around the other side and walk in like she was the greatest warrior who ever lived. She'd demand the respect and accept nothing left. An exception, she heard a man's voice growl. A man's voice she recognized. Her father's. Really? She froze in place, now in no hurry to interrupt the conversation. She crouched down as close as she could get to the rear of the hut, out of everyone's sight. Could she dare to hope be this fortunate? The new plague has killed yet more travelers who visit our city and villages. Kingdoms are cutting off trade with us, and we had little to begin with. Resources will become too scarce to sustain even the young we have. We will need to expand to the other richer lands southeast. Hunting will no longer be enough, one elder said. You think diplomacy with those weaklings? Why not just meet them in open war? We could crush them easily, her father said. You misunderstand, Helgareth. It's not diplomacy I seek, but more a direct path to their extinction. Deliver your daughter the news we've granted her an exception. Charge her with befriending all their people. Allow her to continue traveling between our villages. Eventually, the plague will take hold there and they will all perish. It doesn't seem to affect us, so we will be free to walk right in and claim their land with no conflict. There was silence. She felt her heart sink. If she continued to see Marylander, it might kill her. It might kill her father, too, who had treated her as his own daughter, and all the friends she'd made there. In a moment, they ripped apart her entire world. Is that what we have been reduced to the great stone tribe to? This? Spreading illness using our women like cowards? A different elder spoke. You are out of line, Helgorith. Your orders are simple. We once honored you as a warrior among our people. We have honored you again for being a father. Something so few can accomplish now. You wish to become one of this village's elders in the future. Do you wish to throw everything away as well, just like your daughter? Perhaps you are to blame. The fault isn't how you've raised her. You must understand. We can't afford to lose even one warrior anymore. That defective girl lover can still be of some use to the tribe. The words dripped from the elder's tongue like a special venom, as though he could think of no greater slur. The silence again. What was going on in there? If you speak of my daughter that way again, you won't like what happens. More silence. She covered her mouth. Did he just stand up for her? What he said to the elders was a far greater crime than anything she'd said or planned to do. We'll pretend you didn't say that. Go cool off and consider the situation. You've forgotten your people's teachings and let your feelings cloud your mind. You've put your love for your daughter above the safety of our people, and you've given in to your anger. Come back tomorrow. Hildine crept away silently and continued to the clearing where they always met. A grinning Marylander bounced onto her feet and skipped to meet her. Stay back, Hildine shouted, startling her. Don't come another step. Hildine, what? I've made my decision. I'm going to become a guardian and marry one of our warriors. Today is the last day we ever meet. Marylander ran toward her, but Hildine roared again. I said to stay back. She drew her axes. If you try to stop me, I'll fight you. She didn't know Marylander could feel the sadness that was ripping through her chest. She didn't know she gave away her true feelings with trembling hands and a wavering voice. Don't you dare lie to me. I can't take it if you lied to me. I must know something must have happened. Tell me and we'll face it together, Marylander said, taking another step forward. Hildine gasped and jumped back. We can't. Why not? Marylander screamed, dropping to her knees, tears flowing from her eyes and dripping onto the ground below her. There's a plague. It's coming from my people. Several have died already. Travelers who passed through our village. I overheard them. All trade is slowly stopping. They wanted me to spread it to your people, to kill all of you so they can walk into your lands unhindered. We're immune to it. I don't know why. I have to protect you because I love you. If I have to be apart from you to save you, I will suffer it. Marylander rubbed her eyes and sniffed. She was stunned. A plague? It can't last forever, Hildine. Wait for me. Promise me. When all this is over, we can be together. I'll wait for you until the day I die if I have to. I promise, Hildine said. I will do what I can to avoid the marriage or push it as far into the future as I can. If I fail in that, I'll run away and live alone in the forest. I'll wait for you too. When all this is over, I choose to be with you. I will be your life partner. Marylander reached for her, but fought the urge to run and embrace her in this very moment. It's a promise. It's a promise, Hildine agreed, as she turned and walked back to her village. Although it was a path she'd taken so many times, today it felt 1,000 times longer. And that's the end of chapter 5. Oh, my nose is itching again. That's because Sunny came back into the room. My nose only itches when I'm in here streaming, I swear to God. And when Sunny's in here. I think it's like a direct, line to my nose or something. Choking on some water, that's me. Only dragon I know that can sit there and choke on water. Alright, chapter 5, 4 years later. Marylander rubbed the prescribed herbs on her feet as she sat in bed. Her father had forced her to put on her usual routine on hold, much to her frustration. Thankfully, she and Hildine had trained a snow raven to deliver letters back and forth, mostly because Hildine had to keep up the appearances of no longer being interested in her. Now, it had the added convenience of them allowing them to continue talking to one another while she recovered. Her people acted quickly at Hildine's warning, isolating and turning away visitors until the day the news would come that the plague was no more. Instead, it had only gotten worse. Physicians from all over the continent had traveled there, eager to capture the glory of curing the impossible. Most had perished themselves. The only breakthrough was a physician from Moira who had used the notes of necromancers to concoct a solution that caused blood to turn black if the plague was present. While it wouldn't mean an end to the plague, Marylander was excited about the prospect it would finally allow them to be together. If her own blood could be tested and Hildine's could be tested, it would verify that neither carried the plague. Those from the Stone Tribe appeared immune, but Hildine could spend time with her without worrying of giving her the illness. Her people had established a box for letters and packages to be sent and received, so they could still stay in contact with the outside world. Marylander had arranged a blood vial from Hildine and herself weeks ago, and she was assured that neither the journey nor the environment would affect the results. 100% accuracy no matter the state of the blood. It could even detect the plague in bodies long dead, and it was due to come back any day now. Optimistic, Marylander stretched out her arms, and a bit carefully hopped onto her feet. She still got up early so she could at least prepare breakfast for her father. She'd be returning to her daily routine soon enough, so it would be bad if she got out of the habit. Expecting to find an empty kitchen, it startled her to see her father already sitting at the table. As she looked closer, he could see his eyes were red and swollen. A letter laid on the table in front of him. Her heart filled with dread. Maybe it was just as Hildine feared. Her people were the carriers and the test proved it. It would mean they wouldn't be able to be together until they discovered a cure or a proven way to prevent it. That might take years. Good morning, Dad. Guess that's our letter with the results? He didn't answer. He only nodded sullenly to the chair across from him. She sat as she picked up the letter and read, I thank you for the background and context relating to yourself and the other subject. The 2 samples are the 2 I've been waiting for, and I'm likely to advance my research toward ending this disease once and for all. Sincerely, thank you. Female A, Hildine, is a positive result. I wish I could provide further information, but for the time, I cannot. There has been no subject tested so far who has outlived the affliction itself. I can't say whether the sickness persists 5 years in the blood or 5 decades. I'm sorry. Oh no, Marylander said, covering her face with her hands. No. Female B. Her father took a deep breath before continuing, but it did little to compose him, tears flowing from his eyes. The paper rattled audibly in his trembling hands. Female B, Marylander, is a positive result. I do not understand this. Your quarantining was sound, and this changes everything we believe about how this illness spreads. My theory has changed. I now believe there must be something in your environment, the air or water perhaps. It may even have something to do with the Stone Tribe's mountain, given they are unaffected by it. I've been in touch with Rose Marie Valencia III, one of Valencia's new queens, who has taken an interest. She cannot travel now, but knows of a man traveling to your land soon, as forwarded is my pleas to him. I will offer to pay him handsomely to investigate this matter for me and deliver his findings. As thanks for your immense contribution toward defeating this disease, I extend this offer for you to come and stay at my estate at no cost to you and your family. I will do everything I can to ease your symptoms as they appear and see to it your death is peaceful and painless. It pains me that I cannot do it more. Estelle Reggs. He dropped the letter and stood, stepping quickly around the table and embracing her. She was stunned. It shouldn't be possible. They were so careful. All these years apart. Was it really for nothing? She grasped her father's hand, and smiled. Dad, that vacant home on the edge of the village you've been keeping empty for me. I want to move into it today. You don't need to do that, he said. You heard what he wrote. If it comes from the environment, there's no need to isolate yourself away from others. I can take care of you too. If you want to stay with the physician, I'll take you to him. I want Hildine to come stay with me for however long I have, Dad. If there's anything good that would come from this, it's the fact that we can finally be together. No more waiting. No more putting things off. I don't have the luxury of time anymore. I'm writing her a letter and she could come right away. You're right. Your time belongs to you and you should do whatever you want with it. If I could... She wrapped her arms around him and squeezed as hard as she could manage. I'm sorry for leaving you alone. First, Mom, and now I'll be leaving too. Don't worry, I'll be okay. I want you to focus on yourself and the time you have left with Hildine. The 2 of you will get everything you need. Marylander smiled and struggled to her feet. He reached out to help her, but she shook her head. I'm okay. I'm going to write the letter now, and then I'll be back. Stay home today. I don't want to be by myself before Hildine gets here. She sat at her desk, pulled out a sheet of paper, and wrote, Dearest Hildine, are you well? I received the results back from our test today. I'll give you the good news and the bad news at the same time. The bad news is we both carried the plague. The good news is we can finally be together. Quarantining doesn't work. Bad. No one is spreading it to others. Good. Seems it's coming from the environment. Something about this place, the water, the air, or perhaps even the magic your people keep secret on the mountain. The physician is sending someone to investigate, but it will be for others in the future. Far too late for us. Please come right away. I've missed your touch. I long to kiss you and hold you close. I want to share every moment of the time I have left with you. My feet are already aching, and it's likely I won't last another month. Don't make me wait any longer. My dad says he will bring us anything we need. Don't even bother packing. Come as soon as you receive this letter. I'll be waiting for you. I love you, Marylander. She rolled up the letter and walked outside to the Raven's enclosure. Her feet ached with every step, but she felt oddly happy. She'd decided. A few weeks with Hildine was better than a lifetime without her. She tied the letter to the Raven's foot and commanded him to fly. I don't think I need a drink, so we're heading straight into chapter 6. Hildine sat quietly on the floor, her knees pulled up to her chest. Marylander's letter lay next to her. She couldn't bear to look at it a second time. She was so careful, sacrificed so much. For years they'd been apart. Add in 2 minutes? Okay. Let's see that over here. For years they'd been apart. She would have given anything to keep her safe. Every part of her wanted to run to be with her now, but she couldn't let it go. The one part of the letter stuck in her mind like a head of a barbed arrow, only gripping harder at any attempt to pull it out. Hello there, Toasty. Perhaps even the magic her people keep secret on the mountain. It had started nearest to her people, nearest to the mountain. Even she didn't know what was up there, or why they dedicated so much to protecting it. Only the elders knew. If the source was magical and she could eliminate it, could she save Marylander? The elders would have the answer. She leaped to her feet, intended to run toward their hut, only to run into her father instead. Where are you running to so quickly? He asked. I'm going to see the elders, she said, attempting to step around him. He stepped in front of her. Have you finally decided on a partner? Father, if you know, I want you to tell me. What do we guard at the summit of the mountain? He seemed to deflate before her very eyes, not because she wasn't choosing a husband, but because she'd asked about the mountain. You know it's one of our rules not to ask. It's a rule that can't be broken. Only a select few guardians know, and the elders. If you go to them and ask this of them, they will exile you just for asking. Do you remember how, a few years ago, when we had our argument about my becoming a guardian? Do you remember how I came back later that day, telling you Marylander and I had a fight, and I would become a guardian after all? I overheard your meeting with the elders. I know everything. He turned away, no longer willing to look her in the eye, lost in thought. Do you hear me? The plague has spread to the grass eaters. Not from us, not from anyone, from the land itself. It started with us, closest to the mountain. It doesn't harm us, but is harming everyone else. Marylander has it. He turned back toward her, his eyes wide. You lied about giving up on this girl, then? It was all to protect them from the plague. You never intended to marry another. You and the elders lied to me first, she said. His eyes were wide with rage, but when he opened his mouth to reprimand her, nothing escaped. His anger gave way to shame. You are right, we did, and we should not have. My father told me stories about our people's bravery. They were the same stories his father told him and his father before. In my life, I have only ever fought against desperate bandits driven across the goddess's burial lands to the west, and this was celebrated as though we defeated armies. Your dream of a stone tribe, of battle and glory like the old days. I understand. I once thought that was my wish too, but it isn't. Marylander is dying, and there might be something on that mountain that can save her. I have to find out. Even if you don't like it, at least stand aside. He nodded and took a step to the side. She moved past him, but he grabbed her arm. There's a book about the mountain. I've seen the elders read it. I don't know what's in it, but I suspect it has the secrets you wish to find. Good, she said. If I have to, I'll kill as many of them as it takes to get it. Girl, he growled, before calming himself. I don't like any of this, but like you, I'm tired of the secrets and the lies. I will start a fire in the hut besides theirs while the hunter who lives there is out. He leaves the hut empty anyway. If I'm right, these elders only care about their own skin. They will abandon all our lore and traditions to save ourselves. If I'm right, they don't deserve the secrets that they keep. Take them and do with them what you see fit. But if they catch you, then Then what? If you're demanding that I not be concerned about your fate, then at least grant me the same as your father. She stood in stunned silence, considering his offer. Her whole life, she was never even sure if her father liked her at all. She still wasn't sure now, but at least they were of the same mind here. He was right. If she expected him to move aside and allow her to choose her own path, it would be foolish to deny him the same. All right, when? Are you not in a hurry? Now. Now? She asked. Your mother will be out for the day gathering herbs, so there's no better opportunity. I don't want her to be involved one way or the other. Losing your nerve, he taunted. Of course not. Take the long way and sneak around behind their huts. By the time you do, the fire should be lit. When they run out, look for a loose board in the floor, 2 from the back. Understood. Making her way around, she wondered if she was moving too quickly. She wondered why her father suddenly did something like this. The mountain had secrets, and she only needed to learn them. She wondered if after today she would ever see her home again. Did she even care? Her people didn't care for her, and more than that, despised her love for Marylander. This was never her home. Arriving at the hut, her concerns about her pace proved unfounded. No sooner than she'd made it in sight, she heard it, her father's voice. Fire! He shouted. Everyone came running out of their huts to see what the commotion was about. Just as her father predicted, as soon as one of the elders peeked out and saw the fire next to them, they fled. They didn't gather so much as a single page of the sacred texts we entrusted them with, nor a single piece of the tribe's treasures. When had they become like this? Even though she didn't share her father's visions of the tribe, she certainly shared his disgust for what it had become. As everyone was occupied with the other hut, she slipped into the elder's hut unnoticed through the same window in the back she'd eavesdropped through before. She went straight for the loose board and found it there, no trouble. How had her father even known this was there? She would have never noticed if she didn't already know about it. Sliding the board aside, she plunged her hand into the dark crevice, clutching a book. No, 2 books. 3. She didn't have time or the patience to go flipping through a small library, so she grabbed them all and carefully exited through the window. She walked casually back home, careful not to draw attention, the 3 small books stowed away carefully in her pack. She hoped her father was okay. They'd probably need at least another hour to get through the chaos and start figuring things out. She needed to make the most of that time in case someone saw her. Sitting at her desk in her room, she began flipping through the books. One was about the goddess. She'd heard of the cursed lands surrounding her resting place, so it was worth holding on to. The other was words of wisdom from elders past, which seemed to come to a stop decades ago. Another interesting read if she had the time. Her father might be more interested in this one, to see how things have changed over the decades and centuries. Not what interested her, the last book on the secrets of the mountain. Flipping through the pages, she could feel her skin tingle. If someone in a land far from here picked this book and read it, they'd think it was a work of fiction. Why had she never questioned the origin of their peculiar magic? Unlike mages who had to learn to manifest or control their magical powers, members of the Stone Tribe were born with them and only affected them physically. It didn't require a thought. In less than an hour, she had finished one cover to the other. She was so distracted, she hadn't even considered why her father wasn't back yet. She penned a letter covered in rushed, poor handwriting. She knew Marylander could still read it. He was right. I'm going to the mountain to fix things. I'm going to save you. Please stay strong until I return. She released the bird and rushed to pack supplies. It would take hours, but she needed to pack enough to get to where she was going. Her journey would take her through several outposts, but they would all be hostile to her presence. She couldn't afford to take any detours for a major resupply. Every moment counted. Time was against them, against her. It was a suicide mission, with virtually no chance of success, but she would go without hesitation. To save Marylander, she'd challenge the god themselves if that's what it took, and she'd win. Nearly an hour had passed as she gathered every bit of equipment and food she could find, but she would need to get much more from other specialists in her village. She needed food rations more than anything, enough to last at least a month. It would be easier to come back down the mountain than to go up it. Sonny! He laid on my keyboard! Yeah, apparently he did, yeah. Alright. I'll read this last page again. As she left the hut, she was ambushed. A chain wrapped around her neck, held by several men who pulled her to the ground. Check her pack, an elder said, standing next to them. One man grabbed her pack and dumped its contents onto the ground, shaking it violently once empty. Nothing here, he said. She only stood, but a foot on the back of her neck pressed her back into the dirt. That's when she noticed her father standing there, bound in chains. If someone witnessed him going into the hut before, had they seen her going into the elder's hut too? No, they wouldn't need that much provocation. They'd become as skilled at scheming as any noble from a kingdom's royal court. Of course, they'd see right through their clumsy ruse. He shook his head slowly as if to discourage her from fighting back, or to signal that it wasn't the right time. Search inside, every inch. We'll stand here for as long as it takes. The elder roared, his voice broken from panic. So much for the legendary composure. It seems the secret compartment she'd rushed together was doing its job for now, but it wouldn't confuse them for long. She had to find a way out of this, and fast. That's the end of chapter 6. This time I do need a break, because I was, like, chewing out Sunny for both muting me and apparently changing my model back to the default. He's a pain in the butt. He's not a pain in the butt all the time, but he is part orange cat, so. Alright, chapter 7. Although she could not lift her head, she had watched their feet carefully. I thought I heard something, but I didn't. Waiting for an opportunity to break free and run. She couldn't fight this many warriors at once, not on her own. Oh, it's because it did go to a commercial.
Ensuring the job always gets done, and the ones wearing many hats. Granger offers professional.
If you're using ChatGPT but don't know how to monetize it, watch this video to the end. All right, step 1, go to Amazon and search.
Let me restart this playlist because it was a nice playlist. Although she could not lift her head, she watched their feet carefully, waiting for an opportunity to break free and run. She couldn't fight this many warriors at once, not on her own. Her next best option was to flee, outrun them through the forests, and steal supplies at the first mountain outpost. She would lose precious time and get unwanted attention, but what other choice did she have now? Nearly 2 hours had passed since they began searching when the men left their hut. We've searched every corner. The books aren't in there. The elder sighed. Suddenly she was lifted to her feet violently, one warrior gripping each arm, the other still holding the chain around her neck. 3 warriors to restrain an unarmed woman. We truly deserve whatever misfortune befalls us, her father said, before taking a fist to the jaw from another elder, who must have joined them while she was staring at the dirt. He smiled, something she'd never seen him do, and the elders took a step back. We found a letter you may want to see, one man said, handling Marylander's letter to the elder ordering the search. I see, he said, reading it over. She'd been careless, so focused on the book she forgot to destroy the letter or hide it with them. So, it's the grass-eater girl again. Seems you didn't go your separate ways after all. Judging by the contents of this letter, you stole the book to learn the secrets of the mountain. Do you have anything to say in your defense? The mountain's secret is... Hildine shouted before his hand moved to cover her mouth. Gag her, he said. Why? It was just getting good, a man said. He was human by the looks of him, but she didn't recognize him from Marylander's village. She'd have known his face. That meant he must be from one of the surrounding kingdoms. Didn't all the surrounding kingdoms ban travel to the region? Everyone looked at him, startled and curious. He moved right on top of them without being heard or seen, and with all that gear. Even though he was shorter than her and far smaller than the men from her tribe, he was imposing by human standards. Icicles adorned his bearded face, and he wore several layers of furs. The sword on his hip looked unnaturally heavy for a human weapon. Most surprising was the fact that it was now winter here, in a place that was normally unbearably cold for all but the toughest humans at the best of times. He shouldn't be standing. Where is the rest of your party? There's no way you dragged all that gear here by yourself. He smiled, patting his bicep through his thick clothes, creating a small cloud of frozen snow. It wasn't easy, but I managed. Your people are really huge. I feel like a boy again looking up at all the adults. I'm looking into the origins of the plague on behalf of Valencia. Mind putting me up for the night? He scratched his chin, looking at Hildine. When you're done doing with whatever you're doing, that is. What are you doing, if you don't mind me asking? The two elders looked at one another, as did the other men. No one knew what to say. That bad, huh? The human said. From my experience, when no one wants to answer, it means they're not very proud of what they're doing. It's too much of a coincidence, one elder finally said to the other. We can't let this go. He nodded in agreement, turning to one of the warriors. Take care of him and dispose of his body in the woods so there's no trace. The warrior nodded, taking a step toward the man. He dropped the rope on his sled of supplies and took a step back, holding his hands in the air. Whoa, hold on. I was told you weren't hostile to outsiders who visited. I'm trying to look into the plague that stigmatized your people to the other kingdoms. Don't you want trade to resume and things to go back how they were before? I'm trying to help you. Stone Tribe warrior hesitated, looking back at the elder who gave him the order. Don't listen to his lies. He's in league with the others to steal our secrets. Get rid of him. The warrior took another step toward the man, who rested his hand on the hilt of his sword, no longer retreating. I can tell you don't want to do this, so don't, the human warned, tightening his grip on his sword. I didn't come here to fight anyone. Last thing I want to do is hurt any of you. This immediately changed the tone of the gathered warriors, about 6 of them, and the two elders. Despite themselves, they all laughed. The elder who gave the order to kill the man nearly doubled over. All right, kill him, but be careful. We don't want you getting hurt. The Stone Tribe warrior charged at the human barehanded, who drew his sword in response and readied a defensive stance. It looked somewhat familiar to Hildine. Where had she seen something like this before? Stone Tribesman's massive arm flew toward the human's face, but he dodged it easily. The human countered with a right hook that landed with an audible thud, rocking the head of the warrior, who stopped in his tracks. The two looked at one another for a moment and seemed to reach a new understanding of the situation. The Stone Tribesman drew his own sword. Did that punch actually hurt him? I am Rogeth, son of Ragnar, the Stone Tribesman said. Silence fell over the group again. Stone Tribesmen had a long tradition. They would introduce themselves to worthy warriors in a duel, but only to the worthy. This introduction was Rogeth's acknowledgement of the human strength. Could a human actually be this strong? I am Blaine Grave, and I'm so sorry I've never known my father. Why not sheath your weapon, and let's all try to avoid bloodshed. Silence again. This is the man Marylander's father told stories about, and that's why she recognized the vaguely similar stance. The style Ramos used was similar. There were a few humans with stories that made it all the way to the frozen north. Rogeth charged Blaine again, this time with no hint of mockery in his movements. He was giving it his all, as was expected when facing an acknowledged warrior. Anything less would be shameful and an insult to the tribe. Blaine blocked the strike, but was sent sliding in the snow, the impact rocking him hard enough that his grip struggled to secure his sword that had nearly vibrated from his grasp. Wasting no time, he countered it with a quick, downward strike of his own. Rogeth blocked it, but needed both hands, hastily adding his left palm to steady his sword horizontally. With a fierce shove, he sent Blaine off the ground and several feet back, landing on his feet and sliding again. I see why they call you stone giants in some places. Damn, you're really strong. Are you really a normal human, Rogeth asked. If I told you I was something else, would that convince you to put down your sword and talk? Even though the first strikes had caught Blaine by surprise, he was already calm and collected. His hand was steady, and there was a warm smile on his face. He definitely didn't want to fight. That much was clear, but it definitely wasn't the cause of fear. Rogeth gave no response, charging at Blaine again. Blaine stepped forward, throwing his arm out with a speed that didn't seem possible. Their people's skin was thick and strong, as resistant to blades as leather, but the man didn't go for a deep, fatal wound. Instead, his cut was shallow, slicing cleanly at both Rogeth's elbows as if he held his blade high above him. Before Rogeth could even notice, he attempted to bring down his blade, but his arms buckled beneath the weight of his weapon and the force of his own strength. Blaine flipped his sword in his dominant hand and slammed the hilt into his stomach, sending him stumbling, falling into his back, gasping for breath. Everyone stared in disbelief, including Hildine. She thought Marylander was impressive for a human, but it was in terms of skill. Something about this man seemed impossible. Even in the freezing cold, tired from a long journey, and weighed down by many layers of heavy furs, he bested one of their warriors with no visible effort. The stories Marylander's father always seemed like comical exaggerations. Instead, they paled compared to reality. "Don't worry, Rogath," Blaine said in a chipper tone while sheathing his blade. "I've heard you people heal quickly. You'll recover from wounds like that in a few weeks at most, maybe faster." At the moment's shock, the elder let his hand slip from her mouth. "I'll guide you to the mountain. I'm going there to stop the plague." A fist landed in her face, and the rim of the elder's ring cut deep into the bridge of her nose. Hot blood poured over her mouth and chin. 2 hands wrapped around her neck, choking her. Blaine moved to intervene, but 3 warriors stopped him. "Enough of this! Kill these 2 traitors and kill the—" A blur passed by them in the darkness, erupting from the nearby bush. Hildine knew the creature's musk before she even laid eyes on it. It was a mountain wolf, one of the most vicious predators of the surrounding forest, but almost always reclusive and difficult to track. They were never seen unless they chose to be seen. It gripped the elder's bleeding arm in its jaws, dragging him helplessly along the ground as it spun and stopped just past the group. Someone was riding that thing. Alright, that's the end of chapter 7. I believe we're like halfway through at this point. Let's see, how many chapters? I have to find it. Yeah, we're like halfway through at this point. So I'm gonna take like a short break. It'll end up being like a 5-minute break, but I'll be right back. Are you, or a dragon you know, suffering from an understocked gold hoard? On April 5th, 1933, President Roosevelt ordered all gold over a small value be turned in exchange for smelly, dirty, paper human money. On June 5th, 1933, the United States officially went off the gold standard. Do you know what happens when a dragon's breath touches paper money? Dragons have had to resort to desperate measures, assuming human-like forms, depositing this paper money into human banks, and working jobs. Gone are the days you could burn down a castle and take its treasure. Many dragons are working on rebuilding their stocks of gold, but the exchange rate from feeble green paper to beautiful golden metal is very challenging. Please consider supporting Dragon streamers with a donation, Twitch subscription, or art commission. Your donations will go toward gold bars and coins, which will eventually allow your dragon to sleep on a bed of gold again. It's the only way for a dragon to get a proper rest. Please call the 1-800 number below on your screen to make a donation today. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and compassion. Are you, or a dragon you know, suffering from an understocked gold hoard? On April 5th, 1933, President Roosevelt ordered all gold over a small value be turned in exchange for smelly, dirty, paper human money. On June 5th, 1933, the United States officially went off the gold standard. Do you know what happens when a dragon's breath touches paper money? Dragons have had to resort to desperate measures, assuming human-like forms, depositing this paper money into human banks, and working jobs. Gone are the days you could burn down a castle and take its treasure. Many dragons are working on rebuilding their stocks of gold, but the exchange rate from feeble green paper to beautiful golden metal is very challenging. Please consider supporting Dragon streamers with a donation, Twitch subscription, or art commission. Your donations will go toward gold bars and coins, which will eventually allow your dragon to sleep on a bed of gold again. It's the only way for a dragon to get a proper rest. Please call the 1-800 number below on your screen to make a donation today. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and compassion. Are you, or a dragon you know, suffering from an understocked gold hoard? On April 5th, 1933, President Roosevelt ordered all gold over a small value be turned in and exchanged for smelly, dirty paper human money. On June 5th, 1933, the United States officially went off the gold standard. Do you know what happens when a dragon's breath touches paper money? Dragons have had to resort to desperate measures, assuming human-like forms, depositing this paper money into human banks, and working jobs. Gone are the days you could burn down a castle and take its treasure. Many dragons are working on Alright, I'm back. I forgot to unmute myself. I remembered to unmute the desktop audio, but not myself. Okay. Let me start this music back up. And we shall start on chapter 8. Marylander drew in a deep breath. Even though this merciful beast had given her a ride, she was still exhausted. Fatigue was something she could manage. She could ignore the pain. Her legs might not work properly, but her sword hand was still steady for now, and deadly if necessary. The older stone tribesman's arms were pinned helplessly between the massive jaws of the mountain wolf. Her own rage had triggered the attack, feeding a powerful desire to kill directly into an animal that needed very little encouragement. Seeing him try to kill the woman she loved made her feel something she never felt in her life. The man kicked and screamed, flailing in futility against the long-haired wolf. She stood tall at the shoulders as the stone tribesmen helped themselves. "Help! Kill this thing!" he shouted. Marylander drew her sword. Several more were arriving now at the sound of the older man shrieking. The human man who was present seemed to be on Hildine's side. He'd moved to protect her, but was stopped. Another of their warriors stood bound in chains, so he must have been the first captured. With a jerk, the wolf threw the old tribesman so hard he didn't bother trying to get back up. It began snarling, circling the group. Marylander gripped the long fur hard in her left hand, but the beast didn't seem to notice. "Let her go!" Marylander shouted. "Kill them all!" the second older tribesman roared. Although Marylander had never visited the stone tribe, she understood them well enough through learning from Hildine. She knew they obeyed elders unconditionally, and that those in the tribe believed their very collective survival depended on it. Disobeying an elder, even with good reason, was among the greatest sins against the tribe one could commit. She also knew that their best warriors were not here, but on the mountain. Given the circumstances, that thought brought her the greatest comfort. 6 tribesmen ran down the hill, spears in hand, straight toward her. She couldn't let them surround her. 3 blocked the human warrior. 2 held back the chained tribesman. 2 held Hildine's arms, and a 3rd controlled a chain around her neck. An elder lay on the ground, and another stood barking orders. Another warrior was wounded on both arms and couldn't even keep his weapon held at ready. 17 in total. 14 who were fighting capable. Against 3, perhaps 4, on their side. 5 if she counted the wolf, but without the wolf, she would be useless. What was the best course of action to take? She hadn't seen the events that led up to the confrontation with the human, but it was clear they'd put more of their warriors on him than anyone else. He was highly capable and likely the one who wounded the tribesman struggling to hold his weapon. It was a precise wound. Her first instinct was to help him, but he was free and clearly capable of fighting. She needed to free one of the bound warriors, and fast. The male was an unknown. She'd never seen him fight. She had seen Hildine fight, and knew that she could handle herself against the spear easily. Hildine had excelled above others in her tribe, enough to qualify as a guardian of the mountain. Aligning her heart and mind, she knew what to do. Outnumbered by this many, and quickly deteriorating health, and knowing the wolf may leave her at any moment, she could no longer afford the luxury of mercy. Switching direction, she focused all her anger on the tribesmen restraining Hildine, hoping the wolf would follow her lead. Instantly, it changed targets, leaping on the tribesman holding Hildine's chain. It ripped into him. Despite him fighting back, he was unarmed, and the wolf tore out his throat with ease. The tribesman holding Hildine's right arm let go and drew his sword, taking a step toward his fallen comrade, pulling back his arm to stab at the wolf. Marylander's sword outpaced him in a flash, cutting his throat before he'd even realized what happened. He never saw it coming. His attempt to defend was so far behind it looked random. He clutched his neck before falling to the ground. Hildine wrapped her right arm around the elbow of the tribesman to her left, taking advantage of his distraction and throwing him to the ground by pulling him over her leg. With her arms finally free, she dove for her axes, scooping them up. Unlike Marylander and the human man, she knew the people here. She'd grown up around them, yet the culture of the Stone Tribe meant that she was no closer to most of them than the stranger. She didn't look like she intended to hold back. Marylander turned to help the human man, only to find the third of the three tribesmen facing him falling to the ground. He defeated all three in the time it took her to look away. Was that even possible? The tribesman who was bound in chains was struggling to assist against his captors now, with Hildine charging to assist. Marylander, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here! Hildine shouted at her before slamming into the larger male and knocking him to the ground. There's always some excuse for us to be apart. I will not wait around to die alone. I'm coming with you. Marylander replied, turning toward the 6 tribesmen making their way down the hill. As she turned, a heavy spear pierced the chest of the wolf, sending them both falling to the ground. Marylander had rolled away to avoid being pinned beneath it, but still she could not stand. As much as she struggled, her legs simply lacked the strength to lift her yet. She was still a target for the next throw. As the warrior released the second spear, she could only observe it flying in a perfect arc. She dug her fingers into the mud, trying to drag herself out of the way, but she couldn't. She closed her eyes. Only the spear never reached her. She heard a grunt and saw the tribesman who had been bound standing between her and the others, the spear through his chest. He gripped it and kept it from passing through him and hitting her. Why had he done this? He didn't even know her. Father! Hildine shouted, running to his side. Don't you dare drop those weapons, girl. Have I taught you nothing? Don't let your guard down no matter what happens around you. It missed anything vital, so I'll live. Keep fighting. Hildine turned back toward the men and charged. They threw another spear at her, but she dodged it, just as she trained to do with Marylander. Her mixed style was something none of them seemed capable of countering. She dove onto the closest warrior, completely airborne, burying both axes into his chest before kicking off and landing on her feet again, just in time to watch him fall. The other 5 men, 3 of which had lost their spears, took a step back. Stop! Another voice came from behind them. Please, no more! Stop! Another elder, much older than the others, stumbled feebly down the hill, struggling to catch his breath. No more! He repeated. We can't lose anyone else. The fate of the tribe depends on everyone surviving. Tend to the wounded now. Save everyone you can. Leave the strangers be. Stop attacking them. The elder whose arms had been mangled by the wolf finally made it to his feet. We're just going to let them walk away. After what they've done, they have to pay for this. Fool! The oldest man shouted, finally catching his breath fully. Where are the army you seem to think we have? I see nothing but fathers and sons, and potential future fathers, who may have sons and daughters of their own. Do you think the warriors on the mountain are incapable of stopping them? Let them do battle there, not here. We will shed not one more drop of blood today. Instead of seeking vengeance for your hands, be thankful you still have your head. He looked around, waiting for argument from the 2 other elders, or any of the tribesmen present, but none came. Hildine rushed to Marylander's side, helping her to a sitting position. Oh, Marylander, why did you have to come? Marylander held her hand to Hildine's face, letting it rest on her cheek. Why do you always keep me waiting? The human warrior only grinned as he watched them, as though this was the outcome he'd been expecting all along. Fine, I'll never make you wait again. You will be with me. I will make sure we cure this plague, and we'll have a lifetime together. The old tribesman stepped toward them as the other handed him the cane he'd dropped. Don't mistake this mercy for anything other than a necessary truce. I wish for nothing but your failure on the mountain, and I'm certain that's exactly what awaits you. Regardless of what happens, Hildine, you and these two outsiders helping you to never return to the tribe again. From this day forward, you are as much a stranger to us as they are. Hildine scooped Marylander up in her arms and faced them. Don't think this changes anything. I was already an outsider. She turned to her father. Father, thank you. Farewell. Never look back, he said. Be better than those who came before you. Although his gaze was like stone, Marylander could feel a swelling sorrow fighting to escape from below the surface. Hildine snatched up her things before turning and walking out of the village. The human warrior turned and followed closely behind them, dragging his sled of supplies. Their journey to the mountain was off to a very rough start. That's the end of chapter 8. We're on chapter 9 now. Give me a little drinky drink, because that was action-packed. Chapter 9. Noticing Blaine falling behind, and with the light of day growing dim, Hildine stopped to set up camp. After getting a fire going, the three sat around it, having not spoken a word to one another until now. Marylander scooted close to Hildine, wrapping both arms around her right arm. Unable to enjoy the moment, Hildine only frowned. Why did you come? You should rest and focus on keeping your strength. It's dangerous for you to be here. Marylander grabbed her shirt collar, pulling her down to her own level. Listen, I'm tired of being apart. If I only have a month, then I don't want to spend it wasting away in a bed alone. I would rather have a week with you. Why can't you understand that? It's not that I don't understand. I want to be with you too, but I want to save... Marylander pulled her close, pressing their lips together. Hildine attempted half-heartedly to push her away, but gave in quickly, touching her left hand to Marylander's cheek. I don't mind that you want to save me. I just want to be with you while you're doing it. Blaine cleared his throat, having been silent during the entire exchange. Oh, sorry. I'm sure you're not accustomed to the sight of two women in love, but you'll have to bear with us if you intend to tag along, Hildine said. She intended to be sympathetic, but it came across more as an order. Blaine laughed, shaking his head. Would you believe me if I told you this wasn't the first time I found myself in this sort of situation? I'm more relieved than anything. Clearly this is where I'm supposed to be. I'll help you save Marylander, and hopefully everyone else suffering from this terrible plague. Marylander detected an unusual calm in him, lending credibility to his claim. She was still somewhat in disbelief that this was the same Blaine Gray from her father's stories. He was no older than her father, and yet the various scars had aged him an extra 10 years. Ignoring his explanation, Marylander was more curious about something else. Do you not see my condition, Sir Gray? As grateful as we both are for your help, are you not afraid of contracting the plague yourself? He shook his head, still smiling. No. Blood-Cling Valencia's magic blessed my blood. It seems to hold the plague at bay, or that's my theory. We'd hoped that it would be a cure for the disease, but once it has taken hold, no magic can expel it. That's why we gave the good Dr. Reggs the idea that this illness is likely magical. And powerful. I'm not sure if you understand just how powerful blood magic is, but to resist that is almost unbelievable. That still doesn't obligate you to help us, Hildine said. Marylander elbowed her. And yet, your help in sharing your supplies is something we appreciate, right, Hildine? Hildine narrowed her eyes at both. We're going to need more than that to get to the summit of the mountain, she said. Marylander elbowed her again, with Hildine's face betraying her confusion. What? Hildine asked, looking between the two. What she means to say is that we're honored to have your aid. Blaine chuckled. I don't mind her direct way of speaking. I know I'm out of my element here, and you're concerned I'll become a burden as the conditions and obstacles become harsher. The blood magic seems to help me there, too. I guess I'll be the first normal human to survive a journey to the summit of this mountain. But I'm not afraid of a challenge. If I die on the journey, it'll be because of my own choices, not responsibility of yours. Hildine nodded. Good. I am satisfied. We will not slow down for you, so do your best to keep up. Blaine returned the nod. Good. Now do you mind telling me what can we expect? You know what lies our path, correct? Hildine stood, holding her fist to her chest proudly. Of course I do. Marylander tugged at her coat. Hildine sighed, sitting back down. Somewhat. I've never been to the mountain. Only those selected can journey to the base and undergo trials. Only those who pass may go forward. The bulk of our people actually live in a town there, with a few villages spread out around it, like mine, filled with mostly laborers, hunters, and a few elders. Being selected was always my dream as a child, so I asked a lot of questions about it. That's it? Blaine asked, tilting his head. I was hoping that you'd at least know more than me. Your people really do like their secrets. Yes, her people do, but you have something on you that can shed some light on the matter, right? You know more than you're letting on. I see it written all over your face. Marylander looked up at her expectantly. Now is not the time to keep secrets. If we're going to accept Blaine's help, we should give him our trust in return. Hildine placed her hand on Marylander's head and nodded, picking up her pack, and after fiddling with it for a moment, she opened the secret compartment containing the books. She pulled them out, handing all 3 of them to Blaine. Fine. I'll trust you, but only because I trust Marylander and she thinks it's a good idea. Blaine took the books and immediately began flipping through. Doesn't matter what your reason is, I appreciate it all the same, he said, handing Marylander the 2 he wasn't currently looking at. The goddess? Marylander asked, narrowing her eyes. Why is there a book about the goddess? I didn't get to read any of that one. My people have a lot of folklore and superstitions about the goddess, so I assumed it was a collection of stories passed down. I doubt the goddess was even real. If she was, I doubt she was a goddess. Blaine grinned, nodding along with her statement. I do like your skepticism. I've had those same thoughts. Wait. Well, I believe that the goddess must have... Marylander began before being interrupted by Blaine. A dragon, he asked loudly, holding up the book as if there was a drawing for them to see. It could be some kind of metaphor or exaggeration, but yes, it says the dragon is up there. Hard to say it's a metaphor when they talk about how to extract the beast's blood, Blaine said, pointing to a line. This leaves me with more questions than answers. This is more of a manual on what to feed it and how to extract its blood. If it answers the basic question, but leaves out the far more important answers. Maybe we can find out more at the town? Marylander asked. Hildine shrugged, her eyes glazing over. Maybe. Marylander hugged her arm, sensing her dread. It's all right. I'm sure we'll find out more along the way. None of this is your fault. You didn't choose where to be born or what people to belong to. I don't belong to any people, but that's all right, because I belong to you, and I promise I won't let anything happen to you. Marylander beamed. Blaine frowned. Promises like those are hard to keep, my friend. Considering the welcome I received in your village, how do you think they'll even let Marylander and I into this town? Yes, this is the town where most visitors go. You must have come from the direction of Valencia to have passed through our village first. It's not well known to outsiders, but insider knowledge for merchants looking for rare furs and meats. Even though most kingdoms ban their merchants from visiting, no ban has been made from our side. You should be able to go in fine, as long as they think you're merchants. That's easy. I'll just say I'm from Valencia and looking for fine furs to give to the queens. Have a royal symbol from them, after all. As for Marylander... Did you say queens? That means, Marylander asked, betraying the conclusion she'd already jumped to. Yes and no, Blaine said. There are 2 queens because they're sisters. The one's partner is another woman. So when you said that you found yourself in this kind of situation before, is that what you meant? Blaine ran his fingers through his thick beard. You'll find this strange, but since you're offering to trust me, I'll not conceal the truth. This is the 6th sense adventure I'd found myself in. I no longer believe it's a coincidence, but I'm also not a big believer in fate. He shrugged, waving his hand dismissively. It doesn't really make a difference to me, so I don't spend a lot of time questioning it. I'll find out, eventually. Maybe. Hildine and Marylander looked to one another with blank expressions. Blaine laughed. Oh no, don't bother trying to make sense of it. I don't. Back to the more important topic at hand. How are we going to get Marylander in? Don't the Stone Tribe hate her people? Ever wanted to know what it's like to have a daughter, Sir Grave? Marylander asked. You could say I'm crippled. It would give me a chance to rest my legs after that fight in the village, and I don't have any other symptoms yet. You could carry... I don't like that plan, Hildine said, rising to her feet, prompting wide eyes from both Blaine and Marylander. I mean, I can carry you just fine. The story will still work if I carry you. I'm going to carry you, she insisted. Blaine and Marylander laughed together, causing Hildine's face to turn bright red. End of chapter 9. We're on chapter 10 now. I got some hot tea too. I'm trying to let it cool just a bit. I'm gonna take a little sippy sip, see if it's good and cooled down enough for me yet. That's pretty cool. Might open my throat a little bit. You know, that warm tea. That warm tea. Alright, back to the story. Chapter 10. It only took another day's journey to reach the town, but it was mostly an uphill trek. The elevation had soared, and likewise the temperatures had plummeted. Snow became thicker and harder to traverse. The supplies became more difficult to pull, and Blaine struggled to keep up with the worsening conditions. Still, he continued along without complaint. Hildine and Marylander talked as they walked along, slowing down a bit to keep Blaine from falling behind, and catching up on all the things that happened over the past few years that didn't make it into their letters. Marylander cried over the wolf in the village, explaining the reasons to Hildine the way one might teach a small child how to read. She did her best to understand, though it made Hildine wonder if such strong empathy was more of a blessing or a curse. Even after they had merged with the main road to the town, there was still no sign of travelers who'd come before them. The snow was undisturbed, and the only sign the road was there at all were the staked markers alongside it. One thing there was no mistaking, though, was the town itself. It was more of a small city. A stone wall surrounded it in a wide half circle. Several armored men stood along the top, with their hair and cloaks billowing in the frigid wind. Even the stone tribe dressed for warmth appeared. At the gate, 2 soldiers stood tall, eyeing them as they approached, calmly resting their palms on the hilt of their swords. One stepped forward to greet them. What brings one of our village females and 2 humans to our gates? Don't get very many... Let me do that again. Don't get many visitors anymore, I take it? Hildine responded, sounding as casually as she could. You were the first in more than a month. Answer the question, he said. His tone wasn't one of rudeness, but communicated to Hildine clearly that he was not the one who controlled this conversation. Not her. I'm escorting a merchant from Valencia. He wishes to buy our furs as gifts for the new queen. The 2 soldiers looked from one another, then back to her. He signaled for Blaine to approach. Understanding the reason, Blaine held up his Valencia's royal symbol. The 2 soldiers looked at one another again, nodding. Tell us the truth about why you're here, or you'll be turned away. Hildine's stomach tensed up. Where had they gone wrong? What's so unusual about the reasoning? Blaine asked. For starters, it's easier and cheaper to get furs in one of the villages. It's one thing if you don't know about them, then clearly you have yourself an escort from one. Second, if you're a merchant, I'm a fish. The weathering of your blade, the way you carry it, your stride, and even the weariness in your eyes tells me you've seen more battle than perhaps anyone on this mountain. Tell me the real reason you're here, or turn back. And if I refuse, Blaine asked. The soldier established a full grip on his sword's hilt, preparing to draw it, when Marylander shouted, I'm sick, she said. Hildine's stomach was really twisting now. She never should have said that. Now they'd be turned away for certain. The soldier's grip relaxed, and Marylander continued, I have the plague, and I don't think I have long left. You're here to see the physician from Moira, then. You should have said that from the start. Not all of us hate your people, but you should know that many of us do. Others may not be so welcoming. So why are you... Hildine began, but Marylander gently kicked her leg. Never mind. You may answer, but don't cause any problems. Go see the physician, then be on your way. He looked at Marylander, and his eyes lingered on her a moment. Good luck to you, girl. Marylander nodded, and the 3 of them walked into the city. Once they were out of hearing distance of the guards, Hildine's curiosity couldn't be contained any longer. Why did you say that suddenly, and why did it work? When he looked at me, I could feel a change of emotion coming from him. I'm not sure why, but my ability seems to be stronger here. Or maybe just with these people? Either way, something about me made him feel something like a sadness. Maybe I reminded him of someone, or he bears some kind of guilt. This is good fortune that Dr. Istel Reggs is here, assuming we're not dealing with an imposter looking to get rich on the good doctor's name. I don't know how he would have beaten me here, Blaine said. He was supposedly in Moira when I left Valencia. Well, you were dragging supplies, and you took the long way through our village from Valencia. Could he have taken a more direct path from somewhere else and wasn't actually in Moira, or traveled with a caravan by dog sled? Hildine asked. Blaine rubbed his chin. Let's go see him first. Speculation won't do us much good. Better to ask the man himself. I'd like to meet this doctor. It's still early. Plenty of time to get supplies afterwards and leave first thing in the morning after we've warmed up, Marylander said. Right, because you have all the time in the world, Hildine mumbled. Marylander leaned around, kissing her on the cheek, causing her to tense up and nearly drop the girl riding on her back. What if someone sees? Hildine whispered loudly. You know that's forbidden for my people. They might kick us out. Oh, right, Marylander said, letting her chin droop and rest on Hildine's shoulder. I really just want to hug you and kiss you until you can't take it anymore. It's the only thing I'm worried about, not having enough time for. Hildine sighed, adjusting Marylander to a more comfortable position. I'll never allow death to take you. Stop saying that. She stomped off angrily in no direction in particular, jostling Marylander about like she was a hunting trophy slung over her shoulder, and quickly leaving Blaine behind. Well, according to the merchants we talked to, this should be the place. The doctor must be wealthy to buy out an entire home just for a brief visit. Not to mention they aren't normally willing to do it for any price, Hildine said. Perhaps they're tired of their reputation suffering. Besides, there are kingdoms that don't have mages and would be hit hard by an outbreak and left vulnerable. Don't be surprised if such a kingdom, like Velmar, marches soldiers to your gates to solve the problem with brute force one day. The other kingdoms won't tolerate something like this forever, especially if it spreads more aggressively. Ugh, I wish they would, Blaine. They should be up here doing it now. I'd rather march with an entire army up that mountain. Marylander frowned, hugging Hildine around her neck tightly. She never felt such helpless frustration from her before, and these snaps of anger were completely out of her character. I can sense 3 living things inside. One may be an animal, she said. Blaine held up his hand to knock, but Hildine flung the door open before he had the chance. I'm looking for Dr. Reggs, she said, and if you're the kind of fake, I'm going to chop your head off and feed it to the dogs. Hildine! Blaine scolded as the 2 men in front of them stood quickling. One of them was certainly the doctor. There's no doubt about that. And the other conjured a familiar magic, sending loose paper and utensils flying around them. Release that wind magic or I might eat you myself, Blaine said. The man raised his hands, taking a step back. I know you. I've seen the bounty posters. Come here to try your hand at the bounty. Better men have tried, Blaine said, loosening his blade from the scabbard, but holding back from fully drawing it. You're scaring him, Blaine, and he doesn't want to hurt you. Hildine, stop! Marylander shouted, causing Hildine to take steps back. Gods, no way. I'm not stupid. Not every wind mage loves their government. Some of us prefer to take money the conventional way, like travel and trade. Did I soil myself? I think I might have soiled myself. Blaine returned his sword firmly home. My apologies. I've had a few unproductive run-ins with wind mages lately. You think I don't read the posters? My goodness. I'll not be one of them, I promise you that. I won't even say anything about you being here. You have my word. Better your word than your head, so I'll consider you a friend until the moment you give me a reason to think otherwise. I almost caused something terrible to happen, Hildine said, hanging her head. I'm sorry. Finally, the doctor, composed throughout the entire exchange, spoke. It's okay, dear. I could see you're worried for your friend. There, just as easily as I can see the plague has gripped her. Say, you don't happen to be the girls I performed the blood test on in this region? I'm Marylander, and this is Hildine, Marylander said, waving cheerily to the 2 men. I thought so. It's good that you ran into me like this. Please, sit in this chair and let me examine the progress. I also have medicines with me that will ease your symptoms and the coming pain. If you'd like, then something to ease your passing when the time comes, then... Even though the doctor had said the words with all due empathy, Hildine still reacted with rage. She put Marylander in the chair, then grabbed the doctor by his shirt. Do not say it, she roared, shaking the much smaller man, prompting Blaine to intervene and do his best to grab her by the waist and pull her back. Release him, Right now, Marilinda said, reaching for her coat, but withdrew her hand to cover a silent, violent cough. After a brief pause, Hildine released him and took a step back, partially pulled by Blaine, who seemed to have difficulty with the bigger and stronger stone tribeswoman. She watched Marilander struggle and became even more frantic, sucking in deep breaths, growing paler with each one. Outside, we need to talk, Blaine said, releasing his grip on her waist. Hildine stomped out of the house with Blaine right behind her, closing the door behind them. That's the end of chapter 10. We've only got like 6 more chapters to go. Okay. Chapter 11. Hildine stumbled forward, clutching at her throat, falling to her knees in the snow. Blaine stood in front of her and clutched both her shoulders. Listen to me carefully, he said. Close your mouth and breathe in through your nose. Slowly. Control your breathing. Count to 5 in your head. Fill your lungs with a full breath all the way down to your gut. She nodded, following his instructions. Now hold it and count to 3. Then let it out as slowly as you can. Try to keep it slower than a count of 5 before you let it all out. Keep doing it until your hands feel steady again. Blaine let go of her shoulders and took a step back, breathing with her to keep her in rhythm. She looked at him and matched his pace. After a few minutes, she stood to her feet again. I don't know what happened. I think I'm sick with something too. Is it the plague changing? Hildine asked. You were in a panic. Your people are so obsessed with pushing emotions down, you lack the ability to manage them when they force their way through. He half growled the words in frustration, but quickly second-guessed himself. No, that's not exactly right. What just happened to you can happen to anyone. I've seen hardened soldiers go through the same. Sometimes experience makes it better, but often it only gets worse. I can't let that happen again. Marilander needs me, Hildine said. Blaine looked at her and smiled. I knew that's what you were going to say. There's someone who needs the resolve and doesn't have any room for doubts. Since that's the case, don't listen to me or the doctor even. You have something you can do no matter what. Do it. I'll help you in every way I can. Thank you, Blaine. Let's go back in, she said, fully composed again. If you don't mind, let me go in first and I'll come back out to get you after I've smoothed things over. You rattled the doctor pretty good in there. That wind mage's hands were still trembling when we walked out too. I won't be long. Hildine leaned against the wall and nodded for Blaine to go in without her. Stepping back inside, Marilander was holding a cloth to her mouth, blotted with blood. Where's Hildine? Is she okay? She asked. She's fine. Doctor, please leave out the grim details of your diagnosis when she comes back in. I've talked to her, but I'm afraid she still won't take it well. Dr. X sighed, looking at Marilander, then Blaine. Then I'll get them out of the way now. The plague cases are worsening, Blaine. They're becoming more frequent and more aggressive. A year ago, she might have had months. With her youth and excellent physical conditioning, perhaps she has a week. 2 at most with proper rest. She'll be in fair health for several more days, but the decline will be sharp. The treatments I've formulated will work to control the cough and the pain. They won't prolong her life. Marilander grabbed Blaine's arm, gripping his wrist tightly. You can't tell her, Blaine. Besides, I believe in her. I have to believe in her. She wants to save me. And if that's what she's decided, I will be with her until the end. Blaine smiled, patting her hand. I believe in her too. We now know where we need to go and what we need to do. Not just for you, but for the sake of all Nethalos. He paused, turning his attention to the wind mage. Talk to the girl a moment, draw it out a couple of minutes, and then we'll bring her back in. All right, the mage said, heading out the door. The lack of argument seemed to surprise Blaine. Don't try to waste time to deny things with me, Doctor. I know that not all necromancers are like the stories, and I even called one a friend. Is there nothing your magic can do? Dr. Rex froze, but as Blaine had asked, did not dodge the implication. It was the first thing I tried. As you know, many of us are fiercely scientific, and anomalies like this are frustrating to us. I can only tell you that this is magical, and it's certainly coming from that mountain. The Holy Maiden from Arthurus even attempted to cure it. At first, we thought it worked, but the illness returned the very next day as though making up for lost time. My various efforts were just temporary. Whatever the source is, we must eliminate it. And what will cure those who are sick now? Blaine asked. Dr. Beggs frowned. I don't know. Even if it will only prevent new cases, that changes nothing. We have to stop it. Documents Hildine stole from her village state that there is at least one dragon on the summit of the mountain, Blaine said, surprising Marylander with how quickly he threw that into the conversation. That can't be right. Most likely it was a false document. Something an invading army might find if they take the village with hopes they'll choose to turn back after reading it. There's no such creatures in the world. You should know that, Blaine. I've seen too many things with my own eyes, and what's supposed to be real ever doubt claims like this. I think it's credible. I just thought you should know. The door opened, and Hildine walked in with the Wind Mage, who was shivering so hard he could barely walk. He immediately went and stood in front of the hearth. Hildine ran to Marylander, dropping her knees in front of her, clutching her hands. I'm sorry for how I acted. How are you feeling? Marylander smiled. I feel great. My feet aren't hurting anymore. I could probably walk a bit, and my cough is already feeling better. Dr. Beggs stood stone-faced. Since you're taking care of her, I want you to listen carefully. It's important you apply this ointment to her legs and feet twice a day. I've mixed the medicine for her cough, but... He looked at Blaine, sighed, and looked back to Hildine. You'll need to refill this once you return down the mountain. Even if you accomplish what you set out to do, the effects likely won't leave immediately. She'll still need intense care. Oh, and although I already know what the two of you will say, Blaine and Marylander would be wise to stay here while you journey up the mountain. A normal human isn't built to survive the bitter cold you'll encounter as you travel further up. Of course, if you're going to ignore this advice and go anyway, but that's my advice as a doctor. Yep, Marylander said, nodding. My people can handle the cold just as well as the Stone Tribe. Under normal circumstances, Dr. Rex corrected. You will still handle it better than Blaine, but Blaine is in good company, as I doubt he'll ever listen to my advice either. Hildine bowed to the doctor, catching him by surprise with the change in her tone. Thank you so much. I won't miss a single dose of her medications. I tried to stop her from coming too, but as you said, she's coming anyway. There's no more time to argue. If you're right, and she doesn't have as much time left, then we have to accomplish our goals even faster. We don't have days to spend figuring out a way through the gate going up the mountain. Dr. Rex patted Hildine gently on her arms and nodded. I know you'll take good care of her. As for convincing them to let you through, I've already brought up my concerns with the elders here, and they were very resistant to any discussions. Blaine walked over to the fireplace and stood next to the Wind Mage, holding his hands out to warm. They'll change their minds eventually, of that I'm certain. What do you think our odds of winning a fight at a gate would be, just forcing our way through? Dr. Beggs laughed. It's 1,000 wonders you've made it up as far as life as you have, Blaine. It's a hypothesis, Dr. Beggs. Don't you like those? He grinned, nodding. Well, your hypothesis is flawed. You'll be unlikely to make it through. But if you did, you'd have a town full of warriors pursuing you. Sneaking around would be a better option. Marylander smiled, raising her hand. That's not a bad idea. I saw the face of the cliff. We could scale it within a day. Maybe if we were already outfitted for a climb like that, but we need supplies. We would have to get them here. They'd be much closer an island than us after that, and then we'd never get away with it. If only there was a way we could just fly up there. Blaine said, pausing and looking to the Wind Mage beside him. Now wait just a minute. I'm just here escorting Dr. Beggs. One trip from Moya to here. One trip from here to Moira. What's your name? Blaine asked. Henley Road. Yes, you heard it right, a road. Bronson Road was my cousin. Before you lump me in with the late Lord Road, though, I'll ask respectfully that you don't. Blaine put a hand on Henley's shoulder. Bronson Road was a selfish, evil man. I doubt he had a generous bone in his body. This is your chance to prove you're different. Henley swatted Blaine's hand away. Nice try. Just because I don't want to be associated with the man doesn't mean we didn't have things in common. If you want my services, you have to pay for them, just as Dr. Beggs did. Don't you think that Don't you think if I was going to offer charity to anyone, I'd have offered it to him? Blaine stepped outside without another word. Perhaps if we were to all meet with the elders again, together, they might listen to reason with one of their own, ask for mercy, Dr. Begg said. To save a grass eater from the plague and a forbidden relationship? To destroy their most valued sacred treasure? Hildine asked. Hildine wasn't very good at the tone of sarcasm, but everyone understood her point clearly. Silence filled the room. Until Blaine pushed the door open again, hoisting a bag over his shoulder. He motioned for Dr. Eggs to clear off the table, which he promptly did despite his confusion. Blaine turned the bag upside down, dumping gold bars onto the table. Everyone's eyes bulged, even Henley's. This was just going to add unnecessarily weight anyway. Henley, I believe this should be more than enough to cover your fee. Whatever is left I offer to Dr. Reggs to continue his war against this plague and all the other diseases and sicknesses affecting the people of Nethalos. There will always be another plague. This gold is not mine, but offered by the generosity of Valencia's queens. Henley took a step forward, eyeing the table briefly with a grin before affixing his eyes firmly to Blaine's. Don't think for a moment that I believe you weren't supposed to keep some of this for yourself. Perhaps all of it. Very well. He reached down, picking up a single bar and displaying it for all of them to see. This will cover your fee. Stand at chapter 11. He's on chapter 12 now. I believe we have about 4 chapters left. The epilogue's not very long though. So more like 3 and then a page and a half or something. Maybe. This peppermint tea is so good. Chapter 12. The 4 of them left the city and Henley informed the guards that he would transport them before returning himself. Thankfully, there wasn't any further questioning and no one was technically forced to lie. They traveled down the mountain until they could see the section above the city, but out of sight of the city itself. The hike took hours. Why are we walking? Couldn't you have just flown us down here and then straight up the cliff? Hildine asked. Sure, Henley said, stopping and turning to face her. We could have left your lover there with Blaine and been on our merry way. I'd have probably died after reaching the top and you could just jump off the cliff to get back down when you're done. Sound like a plan? Blaine and Marylander laughed, and Hildine quickly realized they were looking at her. Must have been the look on her face. I thought it was a fair question, Hildine protested. You know how low the wind chill is here. Imagine having it enveloping your body at high velocity. You'd freeze solid in no time. What do you think I am? Henley said, putting his hands on his hips. Blaine stood beside Henley, putting a hand on his shoulder. Don't mind, Henley. He's taking your comment personally because it is personal. Admitting that he can't fully control the wind around him brands him as a novice wind mage. Henley narrowed his eyes at Blaine and gently brushed his hand off his shoulder. That is correct, Blaine. However, I'm specialized. What I lack in power, I make up for in finesse. A rare finesse, I might add. Blaine nodded, signaling he understood. Hildine and Marylander did not know what wind magic was like and had never seen it in person. To them, the thought of someone being able to fly and bring others with them was near to godhood. Yet Blaine poked jokes as though he'd seen this sort of thing regularly. A multi-stream mage, then. Impressive. Thank you, Blaine. I'll treasure your compliment. Now, are we done? I'd prefer to be rid of the 3 of you as quickly as possible. Just how long has it been since you last bathed, anyway? Now that he's over his initial fear of Blaine stabbing him and eating him, Henley was very much living up to the pompous reputation noble wind mages had earned. Marylander chuckled, but quickly covered her mouth. It was hard not to react to what a person was feeling rather than what they were showing. But she felt it, she owed it to everyone to try. So, is everyone ready? Getting the 3 of you and your supplies up to the top is going to be slow going. If I lose consciousness, it was nice meeting all of you. Free meal for the wildlife. Marylander glanced over to Blaine, expecting him to look unsettled. Of course we're ready. If we didn't have complete faith in you, we wouldn't be agreeing to do this, Blaine said, betraying his feelings. He gave Henley a hard slap on the back, nearly knocking him over. Marylander pondered why people always lied, even when they valued honesty the way Blaine did. Sometimes it was better to lie to someone than to tell them the truth. What would that being honest about the sinking feeling in his stomach accomplish? Could she even imagine Blaine saying he was too scared to go through with it? Yet, that's what the feelings in his heart betrayed. Fear. A fear of completely contradicted the calm smile on his face. Hildine felt the same as she had from the start. Impatient, anxious. Fear too, but a different sort of fear. Her emotions were always too chaotic to make sense of, and this newfound sensitivity only made it more difficult, almost overwhelming. Henley was utterly terrified and only made a half-baked attempt to hide the fact. Blaine knew this and was trying to build him up. Marylander still couldn't make sense of why he was doing this after all. I've never been flown by a wind mage I wasn't trying to kill before. This is going to be fun. Very reassuring, Blaine, thank you. Now stand close. I have to concentrate on everything I carry up. Normally I only do one person in better conditions and without large objects, so this is a bit of experiment. A bit of a what? Hildine asked, her eyes wide. Slowly they lifted into the air along with Blaine's sled of restocked supplies. They'd stocked up before they departed the city, but still went lean for the flight. A mistake they may or may not regret later. Or may not regret sooner, depending on how the flight went. Marylander held up her arms with a wide smile. Wow! Hildine had been so tense she could barely move, but upon seeing Marylander's cheery reaction, she softened. She turned her head and they smiled at one another. Blaine was too afraid to say anything, noticing the strained look of concentration on Henley's face. At first, it was all fun. They wondered why they were ever worried. About halfway up, that changed, mostly for Blaine and Henley. Their skin was bright red, and despite the extra bundling up they'd done before lifting off, they were both shivering. It was bad enough for Blaine, but Henley had to concentrate. A little over halfway, they descended again. Henley! Blaine shouted. We're all dead if we drop from here. Stay with it. Henley nodded, raising them back up again. Again, they descended. Let's sing together, Marylander said, slapping Hildine on the shoulder. In front of them? Hildine asked, clenching her teeth. Without waiting, Marylander sang the opening lines of a song her people would sing at celebrations. Hildine hesitated for a moment, but joined in. It took a second song to get them all the way up, but it kept Henley awake and concentrating. The second song was a romantic one. Now Hildine's face was even redder than Blaine's or Henley's. They made it to the top safely, and Hildine worked quickly to make a fire for them. They'd gone further than intended. Henley seems to extended the flight in order to finish the second song. Lucky for them. It would save them hours of slow walking. Once it was ignited, they all hovered around it. Even though Hildine and Marylander were freezing like the men, it was still comforting. Henley rubbed his hands together furiously, shaking so hard he could barely stand. The wind had already burnt his face, and his fingers were a light shade of purple. Blaine fared better, somehow. Are you not freezing because of the Queen Valencia's blood blessing, Blaine? Marylander asked. Blaine turned his hands over and over and looked at them several times. That's my theory. Blood magic, Henley shouted, springing back to life. Are you kidding me? You really get around, Blaine. Is the new queen really as impressive as they say? I've become just as much as a student as a warrior, and so far she's more. I'm sure many think the stories are exaggerations to deter Estania from bullying Valencia, but I witnessed over 2,000 soldiers fall to the ground at her feet. You want to know the best part? What's that? Henley asked eagerly. No one died. Want to know the worst part? Yeah. All of them could have been with even less effort on her part. If she'd meant to kill them, it could have easily been 10,000, perhaps more. I can see why the entire continent was terrified of her grandmother. I'm happy they seem to be nothing alike. Well, contrary to what you may believe, I'm happy to hear that. Estania needs a reality check. From without and within. Both seem to be happening, and no small thanks to you and those you associate with. I hope that you're a success on this mountain. All of Nethalos, including Estania, is safer for it. And that's thanks to you, Henley, Marylander said. Thank you for bringing us this far, and further than you promised. You risked a lot for strangers. For gold. Don't forget that, Henley said, trying to harden his tone again. Marylander giggled. Right, of course. She leaned in, whispering something to Hildine that made her scrunch her eyebrows. I'm not doing that, Marylander laughed again. You seem to be feeling better, Blaine said. Much better. I'm not going to do that, Hildine repeated. You don't have to, Marylander said. Blaine and Henley looked at one another, equally confused. Well, I'm off, Henley said, dusting off his coat. May the wind always be at your back. Actually, in your case, may it blow as little as possible. Wait, Hildine said, approaching him. She put her hands on his shoulders and leaned down, kissing him on the forehead. For luck, and a thank you. What? Why? Thanks. Well, good luck to all of you too. He quickly dove off the cliff, hovering quickly toward the ground. What was that about? Blaine asked. Oh, he couldn't get his mind off Hildine the whole time. His heart warmed like this fire every time he looked at her. Shut up, Hildine said. You could tell just by being near him, Blaine asked. He sounded more worried than excited. Don't worry, Blaine. For me, it's more of a blessing than a curse. Henley is one of the kindest men you'll ever meet. He puts more effort into hiding it when he should embrace who he is. Even I could see that, Blaine said. I am never doing that again, Hildine said. Blaine and Marylander laughed. Chapter 13. This is the end of chapter 12. We're on chapter 13. Chapter 13. 1 week later. The conditions were grueling and exhausting. Wind cut them to the bone, and lowering oxygen levels made it more difficult to ignite fires or have restful sleep. Blaine struggled despite the blood blessing he had hoped would carry him through. Every step became a battle, even if not the battle they had expected. 3 outposts they'd encountered had all been emptied, but the journey was no easier because of it. The higher they climbed, the thinner the air became. Every breath took a toll on their bodies that became more and more difficult to pay. Blaine insisted that they not slow down, and that he would catch up, but each day that was taking longer and longer. We're almost there, Blaine. Just a bit further, Hildine shouted behind her. Though she did her best to hide it, even she struggled. As they neared the summit, the 3 encountered the first signs of life, or at least what used to be life. Dozens of bodies jutted from the frozen snow. Many still clutched weapons. What had happened here? Hildine stopped and waited for Blaine. What is this? He asked, after taking a moment to catch his breath. These 2 groups fought one another. Marylander pointed to a body further ahead. That one looks different. Actually, several of them looks different. Is that... Hildine approached one of them and bent down for a closer look. A black goo was oozing from their eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. Somehow it hadn't frozen. No liquid should be able to escape the freeze at this height. Even the skins of water they kept against their bodies couldn't stay warm. They had to melt the snow for water. But somehow, whatever this was, still flowed from long-dead corpses. She reached out a finger. Don't touch that, Blaine shouted. She pulled back quickly. Of course, what was she thinking? What is that? Hildine asked. Marylander hugged her tightly. I'm scared. Your people would never fight against each other like this. Every life is too precious. Only something awful could explain it. Could the dragon be controlling them? Somehow, they must not have been themselves. Maybe they tried to attack the city below. Or maybe the warriors from the city sent a scouting party to reclaim the mountain. They should have asked for help or sent more, Hildine said. All this is our fault. I'm sorry, Marylander. I'm sorry, Blaine. Marylander hugged her even tighter. You're the one here trying to fix things and putting others before yourself. Even if all of that is true, none of this is your fault. You don't bear any of the blame for it. Agreed, Blaine said. And this changes nothing except that maybe we'll encounter less resistance. Or none. If they haven't brought in fresh supplies from the city below, perhaps these mutated men have all starved by now. We can deal with the dragon directly. Marylander shook her head. Something isn't right about that either. I feel something from the summit of this mountain. An unbearable pain and heartbreak. It's worse than anything I felt from anyone. Could it be the dragon? Hildine growled as she adjusted her weapon belt. Regardless of why it's doing the things it's doing, we have to stop it. I don't care what its reason is. I won't let you die to spare the feelings of a dragon. Hildine's right. The misguided ways have a reason for doing the things they do. Most villains I've encountered believe they're acting in the interests of the greater good. Some of them are seeking their own revenge, often under the guise of helping. How would you have us face it if not with force? I would stand before it, drop my weapons to the ground, and beg forgiveness with all my heart. And mean it. The creature was wronged, probably enslaved against its will. We need to show remorse in its appeal to hope for a better future. It isn't angry. It's sad. Its heart is broken, Marylander said, tears running down her cheeks and freezing to her face. Blaine attempted to speak, but no words escaped. He only stood silently and considered what she said. That's naive, Hildine shouted, turning her head to look Marylander in the eyes. I love you. I won't let anyone take you away from me. If I have to kill a sad dragon to save you, I'll kill every dragon up there. 10, 20, 1,000. It doesn't matter. I won't stop until you're cured. I don't care about good or evil. If I have to choose between you and that world, it will always be you. Don't you understand that? I don't have the empathy you do. I don't have the range of emotions that you do, and I know I'm not in touch with them and can't express them well. But I know one thing. No matter how good or bad the world is, I need to see it with you. Blaine sighed, but never lifted his head. As much as he may have wanted to offer some kind of advice or wisdom to the two, the words simply wouldn't come. That's when he saw it. Is that a wall up ahead? He asked, holding his hand above his brow to block the sun's rays. Hildine trudged forward with Marylander on her back. It really was a wall. Someone had cobbled it together in a hurry from rough lumber they'd lugged up the mountain. How long had it been here? Months? Years? This is the best and quickest place to put a wall we've seen. 2 rock wall formations on each side that stretch from cliff to cliff, with only an opening large enough for a few people to fit through the middle, Blaine observed. Soldiers could put together a wall like this in just a few scant hours. Why? This isn't a gate that can be locked and opened. This is not meant to be moved easily. Hildine unnotched the leather straps covering the axes on her belt, pulling them both free. All that matters is it's in our way. Blaine nodded, making no argument, and took a step back. Marylander slid down and walked up a short distance behind them, taking a seat on Blaine's supply shed. Blaine narrowed his eyes, noticing a pendant she was clutching beneath the collar of her coat. Without warning, splinters of wood went flying in every direction. Hildine alternated blows in the same spot, chopping through frozen wood with her thick and heavy axes. The amount of strength and precision needed to move through so much lumber quickly would have made even the most experienced lumberjack green with envy. Yet, as the minutes passed, her pace never slowed. Her blows never weakened, even as Blade found it difficult to breathe just standing and watching her.
For the ones who know safety isn't a catchphrase, it's a culture.
Uh-oh.
The ones who help make sure...
We got started again. No, there's not much left.
To know this, but Amazon actually
Darn
has a
ads!
$50 million fund that
I
they
need
can
to,
take
guys,
out every
update the ad blocker here. Sunny. In less than 10 minutes, she cut a hole large enough for them to pass through. Nothing had poured through it or had come to see what they were up to in that time. A great relief to all of them. Not that it would have deterred Hildine. Hildine bent down, allowing Marylander to climb easily onto her back again before the three passed through the opening. There were more corpses beyond the wall. Now we know for sure that your warriors from the city were walling the mountain off from the city and not from the other way around. How do you know that for certain? Hildine asked. Direction of the nails. They hammered in him from the side we entered. That tells us everything we need to know. Hildine had been so focused on getting through that she hadn't considered the direction of the nails. Nor had she questioned Marylander's stable condition. Blaine had certainly noticed, but said nothing. Suddenly, several bodies sat up in the snow. Then more. Before long, there were nearly a dozen figures sitting, and now rising to their feet. They looked empty. Some had been injured and should have been long dead from the wounds endured. Some were unarmed and others held weapons. The same black ooze dripped from their faces. Their skin was black from being long frozen. Whatever was driving them forward, be it dragon or some kind of corruption, it was magical. Get ready, Blaine said. I feel nothing from them. They're empty, Marylander said, drawing her sword. Blaine struggled to maintain a firm grip on his heavy blade, fighting against the slippery hilt and his weakening frostbit fingers fusing to obey him. The first to charge them was closest to him, and he cut it down with ease. Hildine met the next, cleaving so hard with her axes that the pieces flew in 2 different directions. Turning her grips, she flipped the direction of the axe heads, flinging them outwards rather than inwards, sending the next attacker flying as well. These are no Stone Tribe warriors. They are cheap imitations. They're dead, Blaine said, nearly whispering it to himself. This is... Before he could finish the statement, dozens more corpses jumped up from beneath the snow and immediately charged them. Not at one time anymore, but all at once. They had to avoid being overwhelmed. The ground shook. The dragon? There was no time to think about it. Blaine joined Hildine, and Marylander had also drawn her sword, hanging from Hildine's shoulder with her left arm and freeing her right. The corrupted stone warriors threw themselves at them with no sign of strategy or skill. Some would swing their weapons, others would simply try to run into them. The bodies piled up around them, and they would have to reposition after killing several of them to avoid losing their range of motion. After several grueling minutes of fighting, they had cut down the final one. Yet the ground shaking had only become more intense. What in the name of the goddess is that? Hildine shouted in frustration. Blaine pointed toward the summit. It's not the dragon, it's a giant? Blaine, take Marylander and run, Hildine shouted, grabbing Marylander and throwing her to the ground behind them. Go! Help her fight that thing, Blaine. Don't you dare leave her here, Marylander growled, looking at Blaine. Don't you dare! Blaine stood for a moment, looking between Marylander and the sprinting giant quickly approaching. If you die, Hildine, there won't be anyone left to save her. Oh, wrong voice again. We'll change it to Blaine's. If you die, Hildine, there won't be anyone left to save her. I can't make it much further on my own. But now you've realized that I won't be able to outrun that thing or fight it myself if you die. Fine, Hildine said. Then we'll kill this thing, and we have to reach the summit together. I'll carry the both of you if I have to. Blaine pulled his belt from his waist, wrapping it around his hand, and his sword, binding it. I'll have the right. You take the legs. The left. Legs first, then the head when we bring it low, he said, speaking calmly between deep breaths. Hildine nodded in agreement. As it approached, both of them swung their weapons at his ankles, hoping to bring down their opponents that stood at least 4 times taller than a normal stone tribesman. Instead, he leaped over them, straight at Marylander. It's into chapter 13. We're on chapter 14. I think we got like 2 more to go here. Taking some sippy sips of my warm tea. And then also some water. Alright. Chapter 14. Hildine quickly moved between the giant's feet, putting herself between him and Marylander, who was sitting on the ground. Blaine was quick to move behind it, taking advantage of the opening as it slowly moved toward the 2 women. With a mighty swing, Blaine cleaved a massive wound in the back of the giant's heel, severing the tendon that kept it upright, sending it falling straight to one knee. Hildine placed Maryland on the sled and kicked it back down toward a cliffside below them. It slid harmlessly into the wall of rock, and she was finally satisfied Marylander was out of harm's way. She turned, running around the giant's right, aiming to sever the other tendon and bring its neck within reach. Anticipating her aim, the giant slapped snow and ice toward her. Heavy chunks of ice slammed into her, sending her stumbling back into the ground. Be careful, Hildine, it isn't like the others, Blaine shouted. He ran toward her to help her to her feet, but was nearly crushed by the giant's foot. The same foot he just disabled. It's standing again, Hildine said, making it to her feet. It healed, Blaine said. That quickly, it regenerated. If we make a run for the past, Retreat is not an option. It's been a week already. We don't have time for this. Marylander doesn't. She doesn't. I understand. I said I was with you. If you fight, I fight. The matter is settled. Thank you, Blaine, Hildine said, readying her axes. The giant steadied himself on his feet. Can you understand us? We have no quarrel with you. Our friend is sick and we need to reach the summit. Will you stand aside? Blaine asked. You're talking to it? Hildine said. Don't bother, Blaine. There's nothing there. It's like a puppet being moved by strings. Marylander shouted from the below. That's what I was afraid of, Blaine said. After we take this thing down, we need to talk. I think I finally understand what's happening here. Hildine nodded, readying herself to dodge the giant fist slamming into the ground from above. She and Blaine narrowly avoiding it, rolling to the side. The 2 fought well together, anticipating the next move. As one, they brought their weapons down on the giant's wrist, severing his hand. It did not respond with any sensation of pain. Instead, it stood upright and looked at the black, oozing wound. He was fixated, almost as though he'd forgotten they were there. Watch carefully, Blaine said, holding his finger over his lips. Hildine narrowed her eyes, looking to Blaine, then to the giant. After a minute passed, the missing hand did not regrow. With a groan, the giant reached for the severed hand with his right. Now! Hildine shouted as the two ran toward the grasping hand. Realizing what they were about to do, the giant quickly withdrew his hand, but not before their attacks took a finger each. He can't reattach. He can reattach, but can't regenerate, Hildine observed. Exactly, Blaine said. And now we know how to beat him. Except he doesn't seem to feel pain, and he's bigger than a house. Your sword isn't heavy enough to sever something like a leg or a head, and my axes aren't big enough. Your axes can shatter and weaken, and then my swords can sever. It kicked ice and snow at them, quickly realizing it should attack from a distance. Dodging chunks of ice mixed in snow proved to be nearly impossible. After a second kick, a large piece of ice struck Blaine in the head, sending him to the ground, motionless and bleeding. Hildine took several hits of her own, but remained standing, now finding herself alone and facing the giant. Marylander began coughing. When Hildine looked back, she could see her hands covered in blood. She looked back to the giant and roared, "Get out of the way!" She charged recklessly, seeming almost as mindless as the giant in this moment. He swung his hand at her, but she jumped above it, burying her axe in his forearm as she did. She held onto it as his arm rose high into the air. When he brought his handless arm over to swat her away, she used her other axe to redirect the blow away from her. With a desperate pull, she propelled herself up toward the neck. Drawing on every ounce of strength she had left, she buried her axes into the side of his neck. She growled like an animal as she leaned in, adding her own weight to the weight of her two heavy axes. She'd do it, alone if she had to, for Marylander. She could feel the metal breaking through bone, and knew it wouldn't be long before her foe was beaten. She concentrated everything, eager to finish the job. But she concentrated too much, becoming unaware of what was around her. She failed to notice the open hand grasping her, and it had wrapped around her body before she had a chance to act. The force alone was nearly enough to crush her. She could feel her bones shifting and cracking beneath the constricting force. There was no escaping this. Even with her great strength, she couldn't budge even a finger. Holding her high above his head, he threw her onto the frozen ground. She bounced several times before sliding to a stop. Somehow, she stayed conscious, but was breathless. The force and shock on her body had rendered her unable to move. She looked to Blaine, hoping he had recovered, but his body was still rested lifeless in the snow. She'd come all this way. She had to save Marylander. As the giant held his fist above her, she willed everything into moving. She just needed to dodge. The axes were lodged into the spine of the giant. A quick blow from the opposite side would be enough. A dinner knife would be heavy enough. She'd dig her hands into his flesh and break it with her bare hands. She had to. But for all the will in her mind, her body could not obey. She was frozen there, still, helpless. This is where it all ended. As the hand came down, the giant stumbled, dropping to one knee. It turned to see what was behind it, but before it could spot its attacker, the other leg buckled, forcing the giant to hold his arms in front of him to keep from falling flat. As the giant bowed, Hildine saw her there. Okay. I'll just keep reading. As the giant bowed, Hildine saw her there. It was Marylander. A faint green glow surrounded her. Her long, blonde hair blew in the wind as she held her sword over her shoulder. The ferocious look on her face danced with the gentleness that made her who she was. With grace and intent, she swung her sword in a perfect arc. The giant's head fell to the ground with a massive thud. Hildine had expected Marylander to leap from the giant's back as it fell, forgetting all about the reason they were there at that moment. She fell as the giant did. Hildine could finally start moving, but wasn't quick enough to catch her. Blaine appeared, attempting to catch her as she fell, but could only absorb part of the impact by clumsily grabbing her with his left arm. His sword was still tied to his right hand. They both fell to the ground. Marylander! Hildine crawled to her, not yet able to stand, and grasped her hand. Blaine helped her to sit, but she couldn't sit on her own. He helped them both to the rock below them, where his supply sled had come to a stop, away from the wind. Hildine, Maryland whispered, grabbing her. He gave you that amulet, didn't he? Used borrowed power, Blaine said, grasping the broken glass amulet around her neck. And it's the only reason I made it this long. Even if his other intentions were evil, know that he offered this life force to me out of kindness. Without it, I would have been dead already. I'm sorry, Hildine. I was never going to... No! No! The summit is just ahead, Hildine screamed. I'm going to save you! I'm going to save you! Hildine pulled away, stomping toward her weapons, intent on sprinting the rest of the way. Blaine clutched at her cloak, stopping her. "Let go of me," she said, elbowing him. He didn't let go. "It's too late. If you go now, you will regret not being here," he said, nearly whispering the words as blood ran from his nose after the impact of her elbow. "I'm sorry. We gave it everything we had." She pulled away from his weak grip, taking another step before stopping. "Hildine, are you still there? I can't see you. Hildine?" She turned and ran back, falling to her knees and holding Marylander's hands in hers. "I'm here. Promise me, when you're ready, you'll smile. A real one. Not just in your heart, but a real one on your face. If you work at it, I know you. With you! I'll smile with you every day. We're so close. We'll get to the summit and..." Marylander's breathing grew heavier, and she struggled to speak. "I'm scared. Will you hold me?" Hildine wrapped her arms around her, hugging her close. "Catch your breath, and I'll go take care of things. You just have to wait. For me." She could feel the final breaths leaving her body, and then she was still. Hildine leaned her against the rock wall, holding her shoulders. "Marylander, breathe! You have to breathe!" Blaine placed a hand on her shoulder. "She's gone." "No, she's not gone. She's not..." Hildine rolled onto her side, resting her head in Marylander's lap. She reached up and touched her cheeks, feeling tears for the first time in her life. She looked at her hands and covered her face. All the emotions she'd suppressed come ripping from her body like a broken dam. She screamed until her throat hurt and her voice cracked. Blaine paced, torn between whether to comfort her or give her space. His cheeks were covered with his own frozen tears, but seeing Hildine's breakdown affected him even more. Without warning, Hildine leapt to her feet, shoving him aside as she reached for her. She ran so hard she could barely stay upright, recovering her weapons from the ground beneath the giant, and running as fast as she could toward the summit. This is the end of chapter 14. We're on chapter 15 now. It's gonna be the last chapter before the epilogue. Alright, here we go. Chapter 15. Hildine charged forward, alone, up the mountain. It took her a mere hour to reach the summit and the enclosure surrounding the very creature they'd been so curious about. This was the thing that killed Marylander. If it wasn't for this creature, she'd still be alive. She hated it. Wanted so badly to rip it apart with everything she had. The gate to the enclosure had once been locked, but no longer. They'd abandoned it much like everything else on the mountain. So many secrets, so many lies. Why had her people done this? Did the answers even matter to her anymore? They did not. There was only one reason for her to come here. Her reason for fighting. Her reason for living. It had died there on that mountain. Now, only vengeance drove her forward. With a mighty push, the gate swung wide, and she stepped onto the platform. There were massive chains hanging around the creature's neck, back, limbs, and wings. Everything. There was also an identical set of broken chains beside it. They had once held another. Had it escaped? Died in captivity? She didn't care. All that mattered was that this creature die for what it had done. Not only to her, but to everyone. She held her axes high above her head and roared a fierce battle cry. Yet the creature did not rise to meet her. It only opened its eyes, looking her over, and closed them again as though she wasn't worth interrupting a nap. After robbing her of everything else, it would now rob her of a final battle? So be it. It would be easier to behead it lying on the ground with its head outstretched. She'd chop it off and roll it over the cliff's edge to be eaten by the beasts below. She cried out again, hoping to rouse the dragon from its stupor. This time, it did not even open its eyes. She charged forward, but each step felt like it was 10 times harder than the last. She made it halfway to the dragon before she slowed barely to a walk. It bothered her. It dug into her mind like hooks and couldn't be pulled away. How would you have us face it, if not with force? Hildine stood, frozen in place. The tears had returned. Her fury was not strong enough to overcome the deep sorrow that filled her heart. I would stand before it, drop my weapons to the ground, and beg forgiveness with all my heart, and mean it. The creature was wronged, probably enslaved against its will. We need to show remorse and appeal its hope to a better future. It isn't angry, it's sad. Its heart is broken. I was the one who was naive, Hildine said, dropping her weapons to the ground. The sound prompted the dragon to open its eyes again. This time, it watched her. She ran forward, finding strength to move her feet again. The dragon raised its head slightly. Hildine stretched out her arms and wrapped them as far as she could around the dragon's neck, hugging tightly. I'm sorry! Please forgive us! She closed her eyes and buried her face into the creature's hard scales, letting out her own pain as she sobbed. Oh, child, a voice said, startling Hildine into letting go and stepping back. She looked around. Was someone else here already? It was the voice of an older woman, but she didn't see anyone there. Who goes there? Show yourself! Dragons were all once human. Most of us still speak. Hildine looked up, her eyes meeting the dragon's. It was crying. I didn't know, Hildine said. You do not owe me an apology. Of all the misfortune that has befallen me, some of it was your people, some of it was my own kind, but I can trace all of it back to my mistakes. Whatever apology you owe me, I owe you so much more. It was my sins that harmed the world, and harm it still, and I will not live long enough to face the punishment I deserve. A plague has been affecting humans. Is it your doing? Hildine asked. The dragon slowly shook its head. It was my mate's doing. He has left the mountain after freeing himself. And he left you here? Hildine asked. We stopped seeing eye to eye. Centuries with nothing to do but talk and bring a pair closer together. In our case, it drove us apart. I'm sorry, could it have been cured? No. Now that he has left the mountain, the curse of his magic should fade. The dragon looked up in the gate's direction. Blaine stumbled through, barely standing. He was on the brink of death. Blaine! Hildine shouted. He approached them and collapsed to his knees, a smile across his face. You chose kindness over vengeance. Marylander would be proud, he said. His head slouched and he was still. No! Not you too! Hildine shouted, running to catch him. Hildine grabbed his shoulder, shaking him, but he did not respond. Be at ease, child. He isn't dead yet. I sense a faint magic within him fighting desperately to keep his heart beating. And blood magic. But I sense no malice behind it. My, how the world has changed. Bring him close to me. Can you save him? Hildine asked, dragging him within the dragon's reach. Free one of my front legs and I will save him, she said. Without hesitation, Hildine ran for her axes and returned. Holding it high above her head, she repeatedly hammered with the blunt backing. At last, the bolt clasp gave way at the weakest point, and the leg was free. The dragon stretched her leg out with immense pleasure. It crackled as stiff bones extended. Scales that had welded together with the passage of time finally broke loose and slid freely across one another. There is a reason your people wanted the blood of a dragon's, but a dragon's blood given freely, now that is a different thing entirely. The dragon slid a claw beneath the scales of her neck, withdrawing it and opening, and with it a small amount of blood on the tip. Tilt his head back and open his mouth. Hildine obeyed, and a drop of blood dripped inside. He'll live now? She asked, decided for a moment. He'll live, the dragon answered. Could you have done that for... Hildine had wanted to ask, but couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. The dragon understood anyway. No, I'm sorry. Even my blood could not undo it. Not even by him. Now that he is gone, no one should contract it anymore. I can't say for certain. Where is he gone? Blaine asked, awake, but still looking terrible. I suspect back to our home, a city above the clouds, most likely to rouse our kind to war. Hildine moved to free her other bindings as she spoke. And where will you go? Blaine asked. Hildine began breaking the final bindings. I am Priscilla, the dragon said. One half of what you know today is necromancy. I can illuminate the spirits of the dead and connect my heart with the spirits of the living. You might say I'm the mother of this magic. I will find him before he makes another, even graver mistake. As she stood, finally free, golden spirits moved around them. 2 stone tribe warriors looked at one another, then to them. They can see us? Blaine asked. As long as I am here, yes. Undeath's power bound them here and trapped their souls on the mountain. I will set them free, just as you have set them free, just as you have set me free. 1 minute there was an accident, and then the next, one spirit said. Then I remember the corpse came to life and attacked us. The more of us who died, the more corpses we had to fight. We were overwhelmed. Then I remember I attacked my comrades. You are not yourself. Shh, you are free now. In a moment you will fade into peace, Priscilla said. Hildine watched them with awe when she felt something on her shoulder. She spun around and could not believe what she was seeing. You did it, a familiar golden form said. I knew you could. Marylander, Hildine shouted, wrapping her arms around her. I don't have long. I'm at peace, so I already feel myself being pulled away. Please bring my body back to my father. He lost my mother already, so please hold a funeral and grieve with him before you go. Is Regs a problem that needs to be dealt with? Blaine asked abruptly. I don't know. He wanted to help, but he also hid other motives from us. There was no intent behind the gift he offered me, and I'm glad he gave it. With it, I could save Hildine and see the journey through. Blaine, hold on to your kind heart. Don't let it become bitter. You're better as you are. Blaine sighed, but made no argument. Thank you. I will do my best. Hildine, I just want you to know that I love you. I regret nothing, having met you, even the way things turned out. Please, when you're ready, and when you've grieved, I only want you to smile and allow yourself to feel happy when you're able. Laugh again, love again. Allow our time together to make the rest of your life better. Hildine shook her head. I can't. With you gone, what's left in the world worth smiling for? Marylander patted her head, fading away now until she was only a vague feminine form. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. With that, she was gone. The other forms faded as well, as though they were a puff of smoke rising into the sky. I will take you to her body and help you bring it to her father. I will hide myself in the woods until you hold her funeral. Then I must go. At last, it was over. The plague that had threatened all Nethelos had been halted, its source driven from the mountain. No one else had to suffer. Even though they'd succeeded, there was still so much to do. And the epilogue. So, he was gone? Hildine asked Blade as they rode on Priscilla's back after leaving the city again. I was a fool. I treated the Wind Mage with suspicion and trusted the Necromancer blindly because he'd been helping people. Sometimes being a good person is the best cover for being a bad one. Very true, Priscilla agreed. A truth I know far too well. What of Henley? Hildine asked. He didn't seem to know anything. He will meet us at Marylander's village sometime later. Hildine nodded, holding tightly to Marylander's body, wrapped and bound to Blaine's sled. Priscilla landed well out of sight of the village, not waiting to add any more shock than would already be experienced. Silence filled the walk there as Blaine and Hildine both processed the events they just experienced. Hildine considered what would come next for her. There was no home to return to, no family. Her people would not accept her back, ever. She would likely be branded a traitor for releasing Priscilla, and might even be blamed for everything else that happened before she even showed up. The elders were cowardly that way. She expected Marylander's father, Romos, to offer a place to stay. He'd been much like a father to her over the years as well, but without Marylander, the idea felt cold. This village was where they'd planned to spend their life together. Without her, there was no life for her here, no matter how welcome Marylander's people had been. Though, they'd always have a place in her heart. Romos invited them in and sat at his table, while others prepared Marylander's body for her funeral. His hands were shaking as he gripped a cup of tea after pouring one for the three of them. Blaine grasped his shoulders and nodded knowingly. How did it happen? Were you with her, Hildine? He finally asked. They explained the whole story, including the dragons, deciding it would be best not to spare any details. Others in the village would be alarmed, but they knew Romos needed to know everything. It's what she wanted, you know. She wanted to be with you more than anything. Knowing you were embracing her when she passed, that brings me comfort. Hildine jumped from her chair, running around the table and hugging him tightly. I'm sorry I couldn't save her, Hildine said through tears. You did. Maybe not in the way you wanted, but you did. Blaine stood, taking this opportunity to give them space to themselves. I have questions for Priscilla. I'll wait for you before we depart so we can say goodbye. You can stay for the funeral if you want, Blaine, Romos said. That's all right. Something is bothering me, and I think Priscilla can shed light on it. Now that I know Hildine has you to lean on for support, I'll head back early. Kildine and Ramos both nodded, watching him as he departed. Blaine has always felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He takes these things personally. A lot like you, Ramos said. Where will you go now? You know you're welcome to stay here. The home that was to be for you and Marylander is still open. We could use your help around here, as strong as you are, though you don't really need to answer. I already know what you'll say, but I wanted to offer. Thank you, and I've considered it, but I really don't know where I'll go. I could roam the world, as Blaine does, but I can see he enjoys doing it alone, and I learned a lot that I don't. No matter how far in the future it is, you will always have a place to come home to, he said. She returned to her chair, but hearing this only caused her to cry more. A knock came at the door, and a woman stepped inside. Everything is ready, Hildine, she said before stepping out. Hildine had dreaded the funeral, but as she heard the stories about Marylander's life, she felt a sense of comfort. Her people did not have such things. When someone cried, when someone died, they no longer mattered. It made no sense to cry for them, as they could no longer be useful to the tribe. Marylander's people were different. Everyone deserved to be mourned and remembered. When she was asked to speak, she struggled, but made it through with the encouragement of those who had been like her second family. After the final words from Ramos, the funeral pyre was lit. Hildine said her goodbyes to everyone and returned to Blaine and Priscilla. Are you okay? Blaine asked as she approached. Henley had arrived and the three of them had been talking together. No, it will be a long time before I'm okay, but my people live a long time. Eventually, I'll learn to smile as Marylander wanted me to do. I owe her that. Blaine sighed. I know, it's hard to think about the future when your heart is broken. That being said, what will you do now? I can escort you if you want to visiting the neighboring kingdoms. Valencia is a queendom, and I'm sure they'd love to have you. I would recommend you as a royal guard. Hildine shook her head. Henley take a step forward. I could take you back to Estonia with me. You could help me convince them to stop worrying so much about bullying neighbor kingdoms and to turn their focus toward a possible confrontation with dragons. If such a conflict takes place, Estonia will play a central role since we're the only mages who can reach the sky. We should lead the defense of Nethelos if the worst comes to pass. Hildine shook her head again. Thank you, Henley, Blaine. Everyone has been so kind to me. Truth is, all of those sound like the start of an adventure of a lifetime. A once-ever opportunity that only a fool would pass up. I've been talking it over with Marylander in my mind, and I think I've decided what it is I want to do. Priscilla tilted her head. Oh? Hildine looked up at her. I'll accompany you to your homeland. I will help you convince your people to end any of this before it ever starts, to choose peace over war. And if they will not listen, as I predict? If they choose war, then I will fight with you. Priscilla let out a slow breath, staring at Hildine with intensity. She was silent for a while, and everyone waited patiently for her reply. So be it, and it isn't my place to deny you the path forward you've chosen. You will find yourself out of place amongst my people, and there might be no way for you to return if something happens to me. That they may kill us the moment we arrive. You'd go, even knowing that? Hildine had her fist to her chest. I'll go, especially knowing that. What happened on that mountain is personal to me. I have just as much right to place my life on the line to fix it as you do. Priscilla squinted at her, then bent down. Then climb on. Will you leave now? Without hesitation, Hildine climbed on her back. Thank you, Henley. Thank you, Blaine, for everything. I hope wherever you go and whatever you do next, you find victory. Without waiting for the replies, Priscilla erupted from the ground, nearly knocking them over with the powerful burst of wind from her wings. Both men smiled and waved to her as she hovered higher and higher above them. Without even realizing, Hildine waved to them and smiled back. And that is the end of the story. The next book is A Kiss of Dreams and Starlight, where I believe we actually go a bit back in time to figure out all this out. It's the story for next time, for next month, and the adventures of Tales of Love and Magic. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around during the narration. I'm glad you all enjoyed it. If you, if you would like to check out the books yourselves, read it for yourselves, the link is pinned Yeah, money, 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 money. The link is pinned to chat. If you can't wait for the next narration installment, you can buy the next book. And there is also actually a whole omnibus with all, what is it, eight books in it with art done by me. And some other specially drawn art. Wow! Art done by me. I did some watercolors for it. I still have the original watercolors too. It's pretty cool. If you would like a signed copy of the omnibus, you can get a hold of Mr. Brogath via Twitter or X, as they call it, and he can maybe ship one to you. It would have cost extra, as Amazon, you know, has better shipping arrangements. You still do have a couple. And honestly, I'm sure he wouldn't mind sending a few signed copies of the regular books out as well, if you would like to have a signed copy for yourself. With that being said, I am going to go ahead and end stream tonight. Tomorrow, I'll be back with hopefully Otter Belinda Sunday. My hand started to hurt again a couple days ago, but today it seems to be doing better. Despite holding a sword. I did a sword form today that I haven't done in like 2 years, and I forgot most of it. But I did a sword form, and my wrist mostly handled it okay. So I think I'll be able to draw tomorrow. We're gonna be doing something. I'm not sure what we'll be doing. It'll be either unicorns or I don't know. Probably unicorns though, because if all else fails, I have the coloring book to work on. But anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow at 2 p.m. tomorrow for Art of Belinda. And we'll play some Final Fantasy XIV afterwards. Because, as you know, my dragon brain only allows me to focus on something for a couple hours at a time. Yeah. So I will see you all tomorrow. Have a good night. Enjoy what's left of your Saturday. And I will see you tomorrow. Good night.